Okay, so good afternoon and welcome to the August 2nd, 2023 meeting of the Local Agency Formation Commission of Santa Clara County. This is an in-person meeting of the Commission. Members of the public may also attend and participate in this meeting by virtual teleconference using the information provided on the meeting agenda. Members of the public in the chambers who wish to address the Commission on an item should complete a request to speak form and place it in the designated tray in front of the dais. Individual speakers will be called to speak in turn. Speakers are requested to limit their comment to 3 minutes. Members of the public who are attending the meeting by virtual teleconference and wish to address the Commission should use the raise hand feature. Those participating by phone should dial *9. Staff will call on you by name or by the last 4 digits of the phone number and unmute each speaker in turn at the appropriate time. Written public comments will be distributed to the Commission and posted to the online agenda, but will not be read out loud. First up is roll call. This is agenda item number 1. Recording secretary, please administer the roll call. Present.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Here.
Commissioner Bell?
Here.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Here.
Commissioner Kishimoto?
Here.
Commissioner Lee?
Present?
Commissioner Trumbull?
Present.
Alternate Commissioner Candelas? Alternate Commissioner Chapman? Alternate Commissioner Chavez? Alternate Commissioner O'Neill? Alternate Commissioner Turner?
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chair, with all members present.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Before we get to public comments, the first thing I'd like to mention is that we're joined today by Joshua Nelson. He's a partner in the Sacramento office of Best, and Krieger. And Josh will be representing Santa Clara LAFCO today in the stead of Nilima, instead of Mala Palacherla, who's our regular attorney. And Joshua, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Excited to be here.
Great, thank you. We're going to move on to agenda item number 2, public comments. This is the time for any member of the public to address the Commission on matters not on the agenda, provided that the matter is within the Commission's jurisdiction. Speakers in the chamber will be called first, followed by speakers participating virtually. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. For those in chambers, if you wish to address the Commission on this item, please fill out a request to speak form and place it in the tray. Recording Secretary, do we have any speaker requests for this item?
There is none, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And we also have none on Zoom, Recording Secretary? Okay.
Seth Charlotte, you're currently unmuted. You may speak now. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. And I have a question and a quick comment. Seth Shallett, the CEO of the Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council. My question is for those of us that submitted a response to the draft, a written response to the draft fire service review within the deadline, will we get some sort of email or some sort of receipt reflecting that our response was received? Because when I submitted the report or our response to it last night, I didn't receive a notification. And my comment is, I do want to express my sincere gratitude to both the LAFCO board and in particular the LAFCO staff for undertaking this endeavor. Greatly appreciate the time, efforts, and energy that went into it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for your public comment. We'll be tackling the fire service review as a subsequent agenda item today, but nonetheless, I appreciate you calling in and expressing your thoughts with Santa Clara LAFCO. Please stay tuned on that. Recording Secretary, do we have any other raised hands on Zoom? No. Okay, very good. We're going to move on to agenda item number 3. This is approved consent calendar. Right now on the consent calendar, we have agenda item 4, which is approval of the minutes, and agenda item 8, which is the executive officer's report, are proposed for the consent calendar. Now is the time if the commissioners want to add any of the other agenda items to the consent calendar. If you wish to do so, you can turn on your microphone and I'll be looking for lights. Commissioner Kishimoto?
Oh, I was just going to move approval of the consent calendar.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the consent calendar. Looking for a second? Okay, so we have a second from Vice Chair Arenas. And Recording Secretary, can you please do a roll call vote?
Chairperson Melton,
Yes.
Commissioner Arenas,
Yes.
Commissioner Bell, Commissioner Kamei, Commissioner Kishimoto, Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Trumbull.
Yes.
There are 7 votes in support, Mr. Chair.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. We're going to move on to agenda item number 5. This is Gilroy Urban Service Area Amendment 2021, Wren Investors and Hewell. Proposal to expand Gilroy's urban service area to include 2 new areas. Area A, approximately 50.3 acres located west of Wren Avenue and south of Vickery Avenue, and including 13 parcels. And Area B, approximately 5.36 acres located northeast of Vickery Lane and Kern Avenue, and includes 2 parcels. This item is continued from the June 7th LAFCO meeting. The staff recommendation 1, deny the proposed City of Gilroy, USA amendment, and option 2, other option for commission consideration, is to approve the proposed City of Gilroy, USA Amendment 2021. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. At the June 7th public hearing, the Commission continued this item and directed LAFCO staff to prepare a written response to the information submitted by the city on May 31st. Now, the Commission also requested City staff to provide a written response to the Commission's questions and any further information that the City would like to provide within 2 weeks. On June 21st, the City provided responses to the questions and comments that the Commission raised at the June LAFCO meeting. LAFCO staff has carefully reviewed the City's responses received on May 31st and on June 21st, and has prepared a response in a table format. These tables are included in the staff report as attachments A and B. The city's response indicates that it has adopted new master plans for sewer, water, and storm drain services in April 2023. Updating their master plans is an important step for the city, as the previous master plans were from 2004 and did not reflect the current general plan, which was adopted in November 2020. However, master plans as city-level planning documents do not meet city's plan for service requirements, the LAFCO's plan for services requirement, which requires information that is much more detailed and specific to the proposed development. Also, the city indicates it's preparing a rate study and has not provided information on the specific service needs and the anticipated costs that would be covered by a potential future community facilities district. No information is provided to evaluate the feasibility of those rates in light of the other impact fees and concerns about affordability. Additionally, the city's new vacant land inventory is inconsistent with LAFCO's definition and methodology, as noted in attachments A and B of the staff report. LAFCO staff has provided a definition for vacant land and explained the methodology for preparing a vacant lands inventory to city staff. This definition and methodology, which is consistent with LAFCO's current and past practice, has been used for the last 15 years, including by the City of Gilroy, to prepare vacant land inventories for LAFCO applications. The first 2 vacant land inventories submitted by the city as part of this application were mostly consistent with LAFCO's definition of vacant land. However, the city prepared a 3rd and a 4th vacant land based on a different methodology and are asking LAFCO to use the city's methodology rather than LAFCO's methodology. As discussed in the LAFCO staff report, the city has more than 5 years of vacant or underutilized lands within its existing urban service area to meet its growth needs. For these reasons, and because the proposal is inconsistent with LAFCO's mandate, state law, and LAFCO policies, as described in the full staff report, the staff recommendation for denial of the proposal has not changed. If the Commission chooses to deny the project, no CEQA action is necessary. The Commission has the option to approve the Urban Service Area Amendment. Should the Commission choose to do so, the Commission must take the required CEQA actions as indicated in the staff report. And as we have noted previously, the proposal area is a logical future growth area for the city. Once the city has resolved its service and infrastructure issues and reduced its inventory of existing vacant and underutilized lands, the city will be in a better position to prepare a clearer plan for services and establish a feasible funding mechanism, and thus establish a need for expanding its urban service area. That concludes my staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, staff, for the staff report. Now is the time for commissioners to ask questions of staff on this agenda item. Also, a friendly reminder to disclose any ex parte communications since the last time we heard this item. And I'll go first to just mention that last Friday I met with Gilroy Mayor Marie Blankley and one of our applicants, Mark Hewell. So I'll be scanning for microphone lights here to indicate any questions of staff, and I'm just going to start at the far end with Commissioner Trumbull.
I have none, nor have had any context.
Very good. Okay, Commissioner Kamei.
Thank you. Last Sunday, I did meet with Gilroy City Councilwoman Marie Blankley, as well as with one of the consultant on the applicant, Gloria Ballard.
Very good.
Yeah. Do I ask my questions now or later?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as noted in the notes from the last meeting, one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of looking at the available lands that the city of Gilroy has, I had asked the city council member whether or not she was aware of, the potential of looking at underutilized lands that are in the city limits but are not ideal for development. And apparently there's a whole swath owned by the city of Gilroy over by the Hecker Pass area near the Bonfanti Garden that seemed to me ideal for unincorporation, and perhaps it would be appropriate to take a look at that. I understand that this current application is moving forward on its own, but it would seem to me that it would be something to consider. I know that at the last meeting, Ms. McCormick mentioned that the Gilroy City Council will have to make any kind of either application or make any decisions and all of that. But to me, it seemed sort of something to consider. Maybe today is perhaps not the ideal time, but I did bring it up at our last meeting. And it seems to me that because of the hill, and it's an area that goes all the way out into Mount Madonna Park. And it is in the city limits, so any future council could potentially have the right to consider development. Yes, I believe it's not ideal, but, you know, one of the things I thought of was if the city of Gilroy, and it is their prerogative, would consider the idea of perhaps unincorporating those lands and incorporating these lands, that might be much more preferred, right? This, you know, I know is sort of last minute, but, you know, in terms of looking at the overall growth of the city of Gilroy and looking at, you know, the lands that they have available for the next years on growth, it is something that I think could be considered, right? So I just throw that out there as a way of looking at a solutions base, looking at what is within the city's vacant lands inventory, and what are the possibilities in terms of being able to take a look at that. I know that this inclusion of that area happened many years ago, but, you know, I think that just because it's like that doesn't mean that we should allow it to continue to be that way. And I think that if it's more appropriate to take a look at other lands, that is something that I think that the commissioner should consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kamei. Thank you. Vice Chair Arenas.
Great, thank you. I want to disclose that my team met with the applicant, and actually myself met with the applicant and the mayor of Gilroy. And then my staff has also had multiple phone calls with folks from Green Foothills, specifically Alice Kaufman. So that's for the ex parte. And then moving to questions. So this is questions before we hear, or will we be hearing from the applicant once again, or what is the plan for the remaining of the time for this item?
Thank you, Vice Chair. So we're going to be running a full public hearing. So we've started off with the staff report. I suppose I should mention, even though this is a continued agenda item, today will be a full-blown public hearing. So we've heard from staff, commissioner questions, then our applicants, commissioner questions, if any, of the applicants, public hearing, members of the public, and then we bring it back to the LAFCO Commission for discussion and a potential motion.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate what our LAFCO staff has done in terms of responding to some of the responses on behalf of the city of Gilroy in the matrix that was submitted. This is, I think, attachment C. And so I had some questions around some of the responses, and I apologize if I hadn't gotten this to you before, Nalima. As you all know, we all take a break during the month of July, and this is on the heels of that break, and so I'm going to take this time to ask some of these questions. One of which is, I noticed that the LAFCO staff response on some of these items are short, and they'll say noted. I'll start with item number 4, which is on, these pages are not, well, they started out numbered. Oh, yes, they are numbered, excuse me. Page 5 of attachment B. This is item 5, attachment B, page 5. And what are the fire service response times to the proposed amendment area? There's a response from the city of Gilroy, and what I had asked last meeting was for our LAFCO staff to respond to have a response to the response from Gilroy, and so this one says noted. And so I wanted to clarify, and if you go through some of the matrix, you'll see that on item 6 it says noted. There's a number of them. I won't go through all of them. Item 8 also says noted. Item 7 doesn't have a response. So I wanted to know, when you have noted on some of these items, does that mean that the response from the city of Gilroy, that they've provided sufficient response, and so that you're noting that, and so there isn't any other LAFCO response from that?
Sorry, it's taking me a while to get to that. I'm looking at the
You.
question on page 5 of 15 of attachment B. The question was, what are the fire service response times to the proposed amendment area? And yes, the city has provided information, and it says primary response to the proposed amendment area comes from Las Animas Station, which currently has a response time of 6 minutes, and the Sunrise also serves this area with a response of 7 minutes. So it's these are questions that the commission asked at the last meeting, and the response was directly related to that specific question.
Right, but this also contributes to the overall, because we are looking at a service area amendment, and we're trying to determine whether there is enough services that are going to be rendered to future residents if this area was developed. This also plays a part for us to recognize whether that was a sufficient answer for LAFCO.
I think one of the questions is, currently the proposed area is not developed. And it's proposed to be developed with 300 homes and adding 1,000 residents. So I don't believe that analysis has been done in terms of how that proposed development would affect fire services. It sort of seems like this response is based on, this is what we could do now. So that's why it's just like that.
Yes, so that, to me, it's unclear. When I see noted, I see it as a recognition of the City of Gilroy's response and a sufficient answer. That is how I was interpreting the noted on here. And so I guess for me, it continues to be unclear. And what I had asked for at the last meeting was to have a staff response to the City of Gilroy so that they could be clear about where they stood in terms of that particular question, that either whether they came from the commissioners or they came from LAFCO, but certainly the commissioners are making these determinations. And so I think it stands to reason that we would have a LAFCO response that would provide us with some level of direction. I know that the overall recommendation is to not approve the project, but if we had these questions and the City of Gilroy had responses for them, then what I had asked in our last meeting was for you to provide a response as LAFCO staff so that we can then, with your LAFCO staff response, help us make a determination, and we'll continue with this particular example, whether this was sufficient or not in terms of services. I understand the overall recommendation, but I think we need to make sure we see where we got from point A to point B. And these are the questions that the commissioners had that were unclear. And so I'd love to hear from the rest of my colleagues in terms of, I'm sure they understand that what the recommendation is on the floor in terms of the report. But how we got here, I think it remains unclear. And I'll tell you that I'll provide more of my concerns later on. Because I see this parcel as an infill, and I know that there are some disagreement between what is infill and what is vacant land. And I think as we move forward, I think it's important for us as commissioners to figure out what exactly does that mean for us. In the city of San Jose, I know in District 8, I have one of the largest, that is the largest district in the city of San Jose. Now, I have the largest district also in the county. So it kind of follows me, right? And so I'm familiar with this concept of infill. And in my district, I had a lot of areas where there were vacant lands, and they just ended up being areas where, well, you know what happens when there's a vacant land. There's garbage dumped. There's a lot of folks who, congregate at certain times of the day. And then we have developers who aren't willing to come in and develop in those areas because there's a reason why they didn't get developed in the first place. It was either because it was environmentally, it was too difficult to maybe not so difficult, but as much as expensive. It was expensive to address some of those issues, or it was just expensive to work around and develop in those areas, because as we all know, building homes, especially single-family homes, is a very is a business that a lot of folks like to be in. And it's part of the problem that got us into this predicament that we're in the first place, in terms of not understanding that infrastructure is very costly for our city services. And so I see this as a particular area where it is infill and is not connected to agricultural land. And so I think there's a very basic disagreement in terms of how we are going to move forward with applications. And this one is just one example. But I think as commissioners, we need to make sure that we have our definitions and the way that we are going to come up with a recommendation very clear. Otherwise, we are going to be making very subjective decisions as commissioners, and that is not why we're here. We're here to uphold policies, and if policies aren't clear, then we need to make sure that that we provide clear direction, or have our LAFCO staff work on making sure that we have either future study sessions that clear up this discrepancy or this disagreement between underutilized and vacant land, which I think is at the crux of this particular application. And I'll talk more about that later, but that's really at the helm of this, Chair, is my question about if the commissioners have questions and comments and they're not being addressed in terms of this matrix in the way that we want them to, and at the level of detail that we want them to, so that we can draw a line from A to B, how can we continue to make decisions without that information? I understand reading the whole recommendation of the LAFCO staff certainly can take us there, but we ask these questions for a particular reason, and we want some concise and that line to be connected from A to B. And so this is part of what I'm having a difficult time with really at the beginning of this, but I'll talk, and like I said, I'll talk more about why I think that this particular this particular proposal has really just met the thresholds of the urban service area, and how the lack of clarity, at least, and we continue to see that in these responses, that may inadvertently discourage us from really having a true conversation around proposals. But I'll stop there, and hopefully I'll hear from my colleagues. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Let's move on, and we're going to go to Commissioner Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted the first question regarding process. We're going to have a public hearing, and after that, we will still have opportunity to ask further questions from the commission. I just want to clarify with that, because I have some questions. I would like to ask those after I get to hear the public comments and all that first.
Yes.
Second is a follow-up question, actually, with the process. This is something new. That's prompted by our Vice Mayor, Commissioner Kamei here. On this process, we've always talked about LAFCO as finding, these applications of unincorporated land to be incorporated, like what we're talking about today. How does the reverse work? That's something that I'm not familiar with, and if Nanima or Joshua could give me a short Reader's Digest primer, how that process could work backwards?
So when you're talking about unincorporation, you mean detaching lands from a city that are currently within the city limits.
Correct.
There is a process similar to an annexation, but in this case, it would come before LAFCO. It could come by petition of the property owners or registered voters. It could come by resolution from the affected agency, such as the city. The application process would be similar, where the city would complete the filing requirements or the application filing requirements. LAFCO staff would review the application, make sure it's complete, issue a certificate of filing, and then prepare a staff report and set it for a public hearing. And then the commission at the public hearing would make a decision. If the commission approves that detachment, then it could go to a protest proceeding, where the property owners or registered voters in the area, if they don't agree with that decision, may be able to protest LAFCO's decision to approve the detachment. And then based on how much protest is received, different things could happen. So if it is a certain percentage, if it's less than 25% of property owners who own 25% of the assessed value of land, then it would be approved, it would go forward. If it is more than 50%, then it's terminated. And if it's between that 25 to 50%, then it might go to an election.
Oh, wow.
I'm giving you a very broad overview of this, but there's a lot of technical aspects involved.
No, that's perfect. That's the Reader's Digest version that I talked about, and that's exactly the level I need for that. Thank you so much for the quick tutoring. And I'm not just, if you recall, I assume this doesn't happen very often. In the time for, say, the past decade, how many of these type of applications have we ever seen?
You mean for a detachment?
Correct.
We don't receive detachment applications too often. They're usually combined. So, for example, it's usually cleaning up boundaries between, say, two cities, where you're detaching from one city and annexing into another city. We've seen those a few times in the last several years. But just plain detachment, I don't believe we've seen any recently.
Great. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Let's swing over to alternate Commissioner Turner.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just have a couple questions, and some may just be for clarification purposes. On the attachment A, on page 3 and going into page 4, it's talking about the August 16, 2017, LAFCO staff provided a response to the civil grand jury. Gilroy is saying that it's been over 5 years, these definitions have not been adopted or provided at this point in time. Is that still true? And the only reason I ask is, if that's the case, could this be seen as hindering the ability to properly plan for mandated growth that Gilroy and many other communities are facing?
We are working on a comprehensive update of LAFCO policies. We have had a lot of other, our workload has been
Sure.
quite a bit, and we have staff, our staffing levels are not up to what they should be, and it's on our work plan, and we're working on it.
Sure. No, and I get that, and I completely understand it. I think a lot of folks are facing a similar situation of not having enough staff to do certain things. But the question more so being, is it possible that that could be a hindrance to Gilroy, to other communities who are facing these kinds of mandated growth demands by the state? Is that possibly something that we should consider in this discussion?
In terms of the vacant lands information, we have been able to provide that information to the city. In fact, even at the pre-application meeting, we've provided all the information. In fact, the city has been able to use that information to prepare a couple of vacant lands inventories, which were pretty close to LAFCO's definition. So I don't believe that is necessarily stopping.
Okay. But probably something, again, Chair, is if that is a plan, we should probably prioritize that to make sure we do get those things cleaned up. A couple more questions here. The next paragraph there, in lieu of LAFCO's definition of vacant land, the city of Gilroy is using the California Department of Housing Community Development, HCD, whose approval is required before local government can adopt its housing element, which we're all facing. Shouldn't that be a consideration? I mean, are we at odds with the HCD by any chance?
In terms of the vacant lands inventory, LAFCO has, the purpose of LAFCO's vacant lands inventory is a different purpose than HCD's. Our purpose is to make sure that the city has used all of its vacant and underutilized lands to its maximum potential, and LAFCO's definition is based on that. And HCD, there's a different intent for HCD, and we're not necessarily at odds, but they just have a different definition for a different purpose.
Yeah, okay. I do think it's probably worth looking into to see if at some point those don't conflict, because every RENA cycle, cities are being told, you're going to build this many more homes, and if we wait until we've maximized all of our vacant land and then run out and try to get more of it, it becomes a little bit more challenging. I know at one point here, there is I think in your staff report you commented that you're indicating that Gilroy has more than 5 years of available lands. Gilroy is saying they have less than 5 years. How do we rectify it? How do we bring that, how do we reconcile that? I mean, they're saying 5, more than 5, you're saying more than 5, they're saying less than 5. Who's right? How do we determine as decision makers over there, how do they determine who really is, there's two different responses to that. Where are you coming up with that versus where are they coming up with their numbers?
So, good question. The information, the conclusion that we have that it's more than 5 years is based on the information that the city provided. So it's not something that we have generated that information. Again,
But is that information, forgive me for interrupting, is that information, how old is the information that they provided that helped you to come to the conclusion that it's more than 5 years? And has it been enough time for them to use up more vacant land where now they know they're in less than 5 years?
The more recent information that the city has provided does not meet LAFCO's definition, is inconsistent with LAFCO's methodology and definition.
Okay. Let's see, I've got a couple of questions here. One of the concerns that looks like Gilroy is stating is that LAFCO staff has requested the city include underutilized land. It seems like Gilroy's concern about that is that LAFCO's definition of underutilized land and the reference to underutilized land isn't within the policies, and so they seem confused by that. How do we address that? Is that true?
Again, I think we have explained this to the city staff
Okay.
previously and provided that information. And again, like we said, this has been the practice for the last 15 years, and we have examples of how this was done, previous applications.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. A few more questions, and I'll turn it back over. One of the comments here, and I think it may not be an issue at this point in time. It's on page 13, attachment A. There was a conversation last meeting about the City of Morgan Hill completed a joint trunk pipeline condition. It seems like there's some concern on LAFCO's part about the completion of that. I think it indicated then that the start of that construction is next calendar year. It's planned to be finished by the end of 2025. So that really doesn't, if that's one thing we can say, hey, that's no longer an issue, then I think that, we can clear that up. And let's see. One of the other concerns that I have, again, about alignment, whether with LAFCO and with the state of California, and the mandates that cities are being forced to have to address with regard to housing numbers. There's a comment here, this is now on page 20 of 25, still on attachment A. Looks like this item 17, the city did not respond to the construction of fiscal impacts on the school district. Does LAFCO with every RENA cycle that cities are being told you have to build so many homes, does LAFCO take a position, or does LAFCO communicate with the state regarding that question? Because it is a great question. But do we address that with the state when they say to a city, you've got to build 1,200 plus homes in that RENA cycle? How do we handle that? Again, it seems like we're missing something here if somehow we're not communicating with the state that that is a concern that LAFCO has, so that when the state puts mandates on a city, that question is also being addressed at the state level too.
This is more in relation to the urban service area expansion.
Yeah.
So we are looking to see what the impacts of the proposed urban service area expansion is, and the future development of that area on the school district. So it's sort of different from the RENA process. The RENA process is mostly within the city, and that LAFCO does not get involved with.
So is this not, and I guess we'd have to be a question more for Gilroy about whether or not this is something that they're going to be factoring into their RENA numbers for the future. Would that be something we would want to ask them when they come up and speak? Chair, anybody?
Yeah, I'd say there will be an opportunity, alternate Commissioner Turner, to ask questions of Gilroy's professional staff when they conclude their presentation.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioners, for your questions. We're going to go over to Commissioner Kishimoto now.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Well, I just wanted to make a comment on that last question he had asked about schools. I do agree there's some contradiction because LAFCO does want to take into consideration the ability of school districts to provide school facilities, but there's also a state law that says if you pay certain impact fees, that is considered like full mitigation. So I'm sure there's different laws that it would impact that. Let's see, I did have a question. Oh, the question has to do with, so the vice chair brought up the question about infill. And I was looking to see on our website if we have a definition of infill. But so when I look at this map, I do see, what in the past was probably kind of this pattern of leapfrogging. It's like there's kind of residences on the right side of I'm just looking at this map that was kind of handed out to us, but which obviously did go on previously agricultural area and such. But so is there some, when we discuss this, it would be a discussion of, is there some definition of infill, and how do we take into consideration, past kind of leapfrogging choices that were made, and Yeah, and, I would just kind of be curious to know the history of, how we even actually got to this pattern that we have in front of us.
So, so LAFCO does not have a definition per se of infill, but what we mean by infill is development within the city limits, within the existing city limits and within the city's urban service area upon annexation into the city. Is that?
Okay, thank you very much. If you don't mind, Vice Chair, I'll go next with a
absolutely,
thank you, and then we'll absolutely circle back around. So I wanted to queue up a question for staff that I asked at the last public hearing, and partially in response to what I heard from the Vice Chair, which I thought were very thoughtful comments, which is along the lines of measuring the merits of the application versus relevant and applicable law and policy. I think that absolutely nails the job of the LAFCO and each of the individual commissioners. I can say I've spent a lot of time thinking about the merits of the application. I've been thinking about Gilroy's housing element. I've made 2 site visits down there. I've been thinking about relevant terms in California law that define what it is that Santa Clara LAFCO and the other 57 LAFCOs in the state of California are required to do vis-a-vis sprawl, vis-a-vis protection of open space and prime agricultural farmland and so forth. And one of the conclusions, pending completion of our public hearing, but one of the thoughts that is in my mind is I actually see one application that has 3 distinct pieces of land that are different, and to my way of thinking can, in some cases, merit inclusion in a USA expansion. In other cases, my thinking is that they are not meritorious of inclusion in a USA expansion. And so that's how I queue up the question for our professional staff is, this is not an all or nothing thing. In other words, we're not required to say, for the entirety of the application, it must all be alternative 1 or must be all alternative 2. We can actually split up the lands that are applied for by the city of Gilroy and say some of them are alternative 1 and some of them are alternative 2. Is that a correct thing that I'm stating?
Yes, the commission can modify this.
Okay, very good. And then just to give a partial hint, because I don't want to get too far afield here, but just to repeat something I recall mentioning at the last public hearing is this southernmost piece that's south of Tatum Avenue. I don't know what the opposite of sprawl is. I don't know what that word is in the English language, but this piece south of Tatum Avenue that's sort of shaped like an opposite C, opposite capital letter C, that to me is the opposite of sprawl, and perhaps might be what we're talking about when we talk about infill, which in my city in Sunnyvale, infill means something totally different how we talk about it. Doesn't matter for the purposes of this conversation, but I view our discussion of infill as being sprawl or not sprawl. And this C-shaped thing south of Tatum Avenue to me is the opposite of sprawl. I don't want to go farther afield than that because we need to go through our public hearing. The other thing I just wanted to acknowledge is Commissioner Kamei's notion of detachment, and I really appreciate that. I've been so focused on what's listed on the agenda, right, that I didn't even allow my mind to go into other areas like detachment, and I appreciate Supervisor Lee talking about that. I don't have a feeling that detachment can come up today, but absolutely as part of a future toolbox. I really applaud that creative thinking, so thank you very much. Okay, I'm gonna scan a little bit more for microphone lights that are turned on, and I see Vice Chair Arenas.
Thank you. So I wanted to just provide another point for our colleagues. When we were talking about, and this is Mayor Turner, when he was talking about the HCD definition, And I think the thing that is relevant here is that the HCD definition is being used to comply with our housing element across the whole state. So all of our cities are using the housing element as their North Star. And I think that we need to also take that into consideration because we have to make sure that the pressure that the state is placing on our regions and on our cities and the arena goals that they're going to, that they're demanding, really, and for the county, it was 3 times as much as they were before, which unfortunately for me, my district bears the front of all of that. The majority of that number is going to get built in my district. And previous to it being assigned to the golf course that is in my district, Pleasant Hills Golf Course, has been vacant for many, many years. This is how we're going to accomplish our arena goals. That is an unincorporated area of the county, so it's not under the purview of the city, it's under the purview of the county. Previous to that, there was going to be 12 sites in South County that were going to, there was going to be like a patchwork to comply with our arena goals. Now, we saved some of those areas because some of those are very important environmentally and just for open space. And most of the brunt is going to be on District 8 and in my district, District 1, to bear. But the point I'm making here is that there's pressures from the state to respond to the housing crisis. And I think as LAFCO commissioners, we also need to make sure that the definitions that we're using maybe not at conflict with what the state is demanding of our cities, because our cities are going to continue to come to us, and they're going to continue to come to us from my district. I'm going to be very clear. Either my district or Supervisor Simidian. Those are the 2 districts where there's more vacant lands and opportunity to actually develop. And when we have a housing crisis, that's where naturally some of the proposals are going to happen. And so I understand that there's this natural tension between vacant lands and open space and the need to answer the call of a housing crisis. And it's up to us to figure out what is that happy medium. And for me, and I'll make it very clear that it is not, I'm not looking at this particular project as the answer to everything, right? That is not where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is my district is going to have a lot of proposals coming our way. And how are we going to make decisions? And so I think there is some relevance in terms of aligning, and thank you, Chair, for being so thoughtful and going out there and really taking a look at the distinct lands, and I think you characterized them as 3. I can't wait to hear how you look at what merits and what shouldn't be included, but I think we need to continue to develop what those definitions are, whether we align with HCD definition. You heard that we don't exactly have a definition, and we need to make sure that we have clear policy because there's going to be more proposals coming our way. And so I think for us to do our part, we need to make sure that we have policies. I'm not a pro land use development person, and I've said this before. I've fought really hard for Measure C, which was to protect not only my district and industrial land in my district that has been seen as open space. This is like about 300 acres in my district, but across the city of San Jose, those industrial lands that are open space cannot be converted into housing unless they meet very specific criteria. And a lot of folks who love our open space and our environmental advocates worked really hard with us to make sure we got that over the finish line. So this is, I hope you don't see this as I'm trying to achieve, what I'm trying to achieve here is clear policies that we can continue to make decisions and to be part of that solution for the housing crisis as more proposals come in, and lining up our definitions and and a clear definition provides a clear process, and if our process isn't clear enough, then we need to work on that and have a study session, and those are future conversations. But I think because there's so many questions, I think we are kind of, we're going to have to make some new kind of determinations, if you will, about what infill actually means for LAFCO in terms of our definition of that. I know that previously we've inherited some definitions from previous commissioners and from LAFCO staff recommendations, but we're in a very unique time and place in which many of our hardworking families are leaving our areas to go to other parts of the state or even outside of the state because they can't afford to be here. And then we have cities who need to comply with ARENA goals, and how do they do that in a very balanced way? So anyways, I just wanted to make sure that I brought up that the HCD definition is what all of our planning staff across all of our cities and our county are using for the housing element. And then the last thing I wanted to say is, for as we move forward, we've heard about this, the 5-year supply and the amount of vacant land that should be, if it exceeds a 5-year supply, there, and I'm going to read this part of the urban service area amendment proposals must include vacant lands inventory, identifying vacant lands within the city limits in its urban service area for specific land use designations, and the rate of absorption of vacant lands. If the amount of vacant lands exceeds a 5-year supply, explanation is required for why the expansion is necessary and how an orderly and efficient growth pattern will be maintained. And so I also wanted us to keep that in mind, that simply because you have more of a 5-year supply, and we all understand how, because of the supply and demand nowadays and how things are not very much penciling out for developers nowadays, and the growth has been very slow as of late, that a city might have more than a 5-year supply, but it doesn't mean that they actually have 5 years worth of land that they could actually develop. And I'll talk more about that, but when we consider this particular proposal, the city of Gilroy has a very historical downtown area that, as you all know, historical buildings should be preserved and shouldn't be demolished. And if there's business owners who have been very fruitful and successful, we don't expect them to vacate simply because we want to build housing. And they also have height limits, and so there's only a limit in terms of how much housing we can expect in the downtown area. So there's so much to be considered when we take a look at what we mean with vacant lands or underutilized lands. And underutilized doesn't necessarily mean easier to build. So I just wanted to make sure that you have this one, the HCD definition, that that is what the housing elements across our cities use. And then second, that our 5-year supply, that doesn't mean that we just deny an application, but that we require an explanation. And I ask you to consider their explanations of why they have more than 5 years. So anyways, that's it. Thank you so much, Chair.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much for your thoughts and comments, Vice Chair. I'm going to do a quick scan of microphone lights to see if we have any other questions of staff, and seeing none, it's time to move on, and we're going to open our public hearing. First up is the City of Gilroy. You're our applicant, and I would like to ask if you would like to speak. We've offered the city up to 10 minutes for a presentation, and then that would be followed up by questions from the LAFCO commissioners. Gilroy City staff, nice to see you again. Recording secretary, if you can give me 10 minutes on the clock, please. If you could just identify yourself for the record, we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. I'm Andy Faber. I'm the city attorney of Gilroy. I'm going to speak briefly to try to put this in a bit of historical context, and then turn the presentation over to senior planner Cindy McCormick, who will explain and present the project. As you know, LAFCOs were created 60 years ago because of statewide urban sprawl caused by poorly planned growth. There were annexation wars between cities. In fact, San Jose and Morgan Hill had an annexation. San Jose. All right. They had an annexation war caused by San Jose annexing land down Monterey Highway throughout the Coyote Valley, which they did to prevent Morgan Hill from doing the reverse, going to the north and seizing the Coyote Valley. Cities would use strip annexations improperly. As your website says, the pattern of growth in post-war Santa Clara County reflected ad hoc decisions by developers, landowners, and local politicians with little to no strategic planning for the future. The LAFCOs were created to control sprawl. They're not land use agencies. They're not created to solve housing problems. They're not created for the purpose of advising or controlling cities' use of land. Again, the mission is to make sure there is orderly planned growth. Again, your website says, urban expansion should occur in an orderly planned manner, with cities responsible for planning and providing services to urban development. And that's exactly what's going on with this proposal. This is a development that will be orderly and well planned. As you know, the owners have been working on this for over 20 years. It's consistent with the city's general plan. It's adjacent to and in some cases surrounded by housing that's existing. It hasn't been farmed for 25 years and can't be farmed now. It's inside our voter-approved urban growth boundary, and it will improve services to some of the adjacent properties. In short, this is well-planned, orderly development. It's exactly what LAFCO was created to encourage and promote. It's consistent with city, county, and LAFCO policies, and it should be approved. Having said that, I'd like to turn this over to Cindy McCormick, our senior planner, who can answer any questions and present the project to you.
Great, thank you.
Can you cue the presentation, please? Can you pause the clock, please? Can you please?
Recording secretary, if you can pause the clock, please. Thank you.
So thank you, Andy, and good afternoon, and thank you for your consideration of this important application. Next slide. I would like to summarize a few points from our June presentation. The proposed expansion area is approximately 54.5 acres, which can accommodate 307 dwelling units and 1,074 residents. This is less than 2% of our current population. This is essentially an urban island infill development, as clearly illustrated in this map. We have done the analysis in determining that the city can accommodate this small increase in growth. We had expert testimony from our public works director and fire chief telling you that we can provide the services. We have demonstrated our commitment to fund significant infrastructure improvements throughout the city in line with our recently updated master plans. These projects will benefit the entire city as well as the proposed expansion area. Next slide. As provided in our submittal documents and summarized in the June presentation, the city and LAFCO share many of the same goals when it comes to preserving agricultural land, orderly growth and development, fiscal sustainability, and efficient delivery of services. We have several policies in place to ensure that agricultural land is preserved and that the proposed expansion area will be developed in an orderly manner with a variety of low, medium, and high densities to welcome families of all sizes and income levels. Residents of this development will be within biking distance to schools, walking distance to transit and parks, and a short driving distance to the hospital and shopping amenities. We have illustrated that we can and will service this small expansion area. The city has a team of staff with years of experience reviewing and processing much larger developments. We do not take our responsibility lightly and will ensure that the developer and future property owners pay their fair share towards infrastructure and service needs. Next slide. This is a reasonable expansion within our urban growth boundary. We adopted this boundary and it protects agriculture and open space, draws a line beyond which urban development is not allowed. Next slide. In your packet, we have submitted a memorandum that illustrates this application's compliance with LAFCO's urban service area policies. We have planned for this small addition to our city for over 20 years. We have collaborated with LAFCO, the county, and neighboring jurisdictions to ensure orderly growth and well-planned growth. We have allocated over $150 million towards infrastructure improvements over the next 5 years. We continue to deplete our land capacity for new housing. We are dedicated to protecting ag and open space through our urban growth boundary, and we are committed to providing our fair share of affordable housing. Next slide. There's been a lot of back and forth on the vacant land inventory, but the fact is that the inventory submitted in May meets the 3-step methodology outlined in LAFCO staff's June report. The submitted inventory was separated by vacant versus underutilized capacity and provided both an 8-year and 10-year history. Maximum potential build-out is based on net acreage, not gross acreage, since a portion of the site will need to accommodate roads, open space, and other amenities in accordance with our general plan and municipal code. Next slide. On May 25th, we had a 6-year capacity, 6 years, of both vacant and underutilized land using a 10-year permit history. We issued building permits for another 26 new dwelling units as of July 25th. We are processing building permits for 184 units in the Glen Loma and Hecker Pass developments, and will be issuing at least 29 of those permits in the next 2 weeks, and expect to issue the remaining permits in the next 7 months. It is also noteworthy that 199 units, or approximately a 7.8-month capacity, is located in the hillside area, which has an increased risk of fire and is much farther from transit and services than the proposed development. As mentioned, our downtown has a number of historic buildings that we would like to preserve. Next slide. We submitted a plan for services that complies with LAFCO's requirements, and it provides an analysis of existing system capacity and infrastructure and the needs of the development. It finds that the existing and planned city infrastructure is sufficient to accommodate the increase in utility usage from the proposed development, and this is further supported by the master plans that we recently updated. Developers will be responsible for paying impact fees for the necessary off-site infrastructure and improvements, and would be responsible for financing on-site improvements. The plan for services also discusses various financing mechanisms, including impact fees, property taxes, and a future community facilities district. Next slide. The LAFCO staff report states that the proposed area is a logical future growth area and contends that the city can establish a need for expanding our urban service area once we resolve our service and infrastructure issues and reduce our inventory of land. As provided in this presentation and the submitted documents, we continue to reduce our inventory every day, and we have developed plans and committed funds to resolving our infrastructure needs. We have been honest and forthright in what the city can commit to, and with regard to this development, we have provided information for our adopted budget and our approved capital improvement program, illustrating our financial commitment for the next 5 years. I am not here representing the opinion of one person. I spoke with our finance director, the wastewater plant manager, the city engineer, city planners, police department administrators, and school district staff. We had expert testimony from our public works director and our fire chief telling you directly that the city can and will service the proposed development. We respectfully ask that you consider the opinions and testimony of experts in their respective fields. As I have illustrated here and in your packet, the city has adequately planned for this much-needed housing. The state has declared that California is in desperate need of housing, and we have a developer that can provide this housing. Given this multi-year entitlement process, we are asking for your approval this evening. This concludes my presentation. Our Mayor Marie Blankley is on the phone with at least one other council member. We also have Zach Hilton in attendance, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And I know that was quick, but I'm in time.
Great job, Ms.
And by the way, I am available to answer any questions that you have about the vacant land inventory or anything else.
Wonderful. I just wanted to jump in and say, welcome back. It's great to see you, Ms. McCormick, here at Santa Clara LAFCO. You're always welcome here. Thank you for going through your presentation. And I'll just start off by saying, before I hand it off to my colleagues with any questions they might have, I love professional staff of all agencies. I think professional staff in Gilroy, you're doing a great job putting your best foot forward. Santa Clara LAFCO professional staff are doing their best job. There may be times when professional staff look at the same facts and circumstances and come to different conclusions from different viewpoints, and I totally accept that. So just thank you for putting your best foot forward from the city of Gilroy. I appreciate your city attorney has come over here as well, and so thank you very much. I'll have some questions for you in a second, but first I want to hand it over to my colleagues, and I see Commissioner Lee has his light on.
Yes, first of all, thank you for coming back, and thank you for the very comprehensive presentation and also answering a lot of questions on the matrix. One quick question is just really came through earlier today is regarding this detachment idea, which I haven't heard of before. Is this something that you think City of Gilroy will be interested to pursue? Because it seems like the reason of not approving this mainly is for the fact that, well, it looks like there's 5 years of land that you could go ahead and build on. Why don't you build that first? But it turns out these lands are really not developable, if that's a term, or as you mentioned in your slide, that no, it's hillsides, it's fire risk, it's far from services, that's really urban sprawl, actually. If that's really not suitable, because like from long-time history that this was been incorporated, whether this is something that we could be able to kind of, let's say, it's almost like swapping, right? Swapping this area that's not incorporated into back to unincorporated. Is this something the City of Gilroy is interested to pursue in the future?
As Chair Milton, or Commissioner Milton mentioned, that's not something that we can resolve today.
Not today, no.
However, I mean, the council has an agenda item where they can put something on the agenda for future discussion, and so that would be the appropriate place to start.
Okay, good. So then the other question is back to our attorneys here, and that is, if we were to approve this today, is it possible for it making it a conditional approval, say, hey, if we're going to approve this, why don't you go ahead and turn those lands back to unincorporated so that we're lowering the number of years to meet the standard? So basically, we're not just approving more a land just for building housing, but for the fact that we actually are converting some land back to unincorporated and not being built housing that we were so fearful for.
It's a very good question. I think unfortunately, because that portion of the application isn't in front of the commission, it wouldn't really be possible to condition that. But if the commission, were to move forward with not approving it today and offering for the city to come back in the future with that as an alternative, that could certainly be an option for the commission to consider.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And my last question I have is regarding the number of units you have there. I mean, it's exciting to see the 300 and so units, but the 50-odd acres, that actually seems to be fairly low density. So are these all basically single-family homes, or are some of these are multifamily units?
Yeah, so we have a neighborhood district land use designation, which includes a range of densities that the developer must comply with. And a maximum of 60% of that can be in the low-density single-family range. At least 40% of that must be in medium-density and high-density housing.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
That's all I have.
Wonderful, thank you. Commissioner Kishimoto.
Yes, thank you for coming back. So I read through, tried to sort through all the responses, and it did get a little bit confusing about what the discussion about, well, there will be development impact fees and et cetera. So is there a bottom line in terms of the expected cost per unit for both operating, ongoing operating costs as well as one-time capital costs for all these infrastructure items that we've talked about, water, fire, all these other city services?
Yeah, so our Public Works Department has an impact fee schedule for a number of utilities, sewer, water, and those impact fees would be assessed against this development based on acreage and number of units. Those are kind of the two.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get an idea of the order of magnitude. Like, so when I glanced at your waste, you did a waste master plan, and the plan says it does not have enough funding, does not have enough to fund the $24 million identified in future user costs. And so I don't know, I imagine it's not just the 300 units you're talking about today, but if the $23 million distributed over 1,000 units, or, so I mean, it's how much, are we talking about many, like $10,000 per, $100,000 per housing unit?
So I gave you guys a lot of information, so this was part of that information, and I can understand it may have got lost in the information, but the $24 million is for a 20-year planning horizon through 2040, and while we have a significant amount of funds today to help pay for that, we would continue to collect funds over the next 15 to 20 years to fulfill that 20-year horizon. So it's not required that we have all $24 million in the bank today to provide infrastructure that will occur over the next 20 years.
Okay.
And that is throughout the city. Most of the infrastructure needs are not in the development area.
Yeah. I mean, so the answer is you don't have a ballpark estimate, like per housing unit, what the development impact fee might be? Is it 50,000, 100,000, 200,000? 2,000?
I can assure you that it would be reasonable, because if not, we would hear from our residents.
What is that?
The fee will have to be reasonable. There are, requirements. I forget the name of the law, but there are requirements that the fee be reasonable. And if the fee were not reasonable, I assure you that we would hear that from our residents.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, but it's still, I'd still like to see the numbers match up in terms of, if it's not reasonable, does that mean you're not going to move ahead with the development?
Well, so we have a significant amount of funds that we are drawing from for the 5 years capital improvement program. And as I've shown on the slide, there's at least $150 million worth of infrastructure funding that's been approved for the next 5 years. And that's drawing from our general plan and from the impact fees and from these different funds like the water fund.
Okay. Well, all right. So I just want to acknowledge we don't know the scale of the fees.
I don't know the dollar amount per person or per unit, no.
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Ms. McCormick, before I go over to alternate Commissioner Turner, I just wanted to acknowledge something you mentioned a few minutes ago, which is that you have a couple of your elected officials queued up to speak, and I just wanted to say we'll get to all of our members of the public, including your elected officials, in due course. So just wanted to acknowledge that and stand by. And next up is alternate Commissioner Turner.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. We had talked earlier about public schools and the impact there. My understanding, based on my time in Gilroy prior to being now in Morgan Hill, was that public school enrollment is down, and I think it's across the board. This development could be a benefit to the public school system.
Yes, sir. So actually, so we have a weekly technical advisory committee meeting with all of our city staff experts in their respective fields, and also we have a member of the school district who attends those weekly meetings. And this application came up at one of those weekly meetings, and just as you mentioned, he mentioned that school enrollment is down and that they welcome this development. And then in terms of school district impact fees, I can't remember which one of you brought it up, but impact fees for school districts are calculated to address school impacts. Yeah.
May I respond to one question, please, just for a second?
Please.
That's Commissioner Lee's question, I think, about detachment. There was some discussion. Detaching would mean taking a piece of land out of the city and making it unincorporated. As your staff indicated, this is actually very rarely done. It's almost never done. And when it is done, it's typically part of a larger reorganization of adjusting boundary lines. The land that you were talking about is the land where Gilroy Gardens is. It's like 536 acres, actually. The gardens occupy a portion of the flat land. Gilroy has actually surplused the large part of that land. In other words, we've gone through the state Surplus Land Act to look at open space development of that land. We got no interest in the land for housing, by the way. In other words, we had to notify hundreds of entities that build housing and open space. No housing developer was interested. There are some people who have ideas about recreational use. It's hillside, mountainous land. Any detachment would have to go through environmental impact. So it's really not something that can be considered today, I think, although it's an interesting thought and something that we will certainly bear in mind, particularly if we end up selling the land, which we may do. So
Okay.
that's the answer I wanted to give.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's keep going.
Yeah, please, thank you. And then with regards to the timeline, again, the impact to public schools wouldn't be for years down the line, right? I mean, what would we be looking at if this was approved today before you start seeing any construction occur?
Yeah, I predict a 5-year horizon. They have to, first they need to go through the annexation process with the city. They need to complete environmental review. They need to coordinate with all of the property owners to develop a specific plan, which is quite an undertaking. And then they would need to develop their architectural and engineering plans, building construction plans, and then begin construction, and that would be at least a 5-year horizon.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alternate Commissioner Turner. I'm just doing a quick scan for microphone lights, and I don't see any, so I'm going to jump in with my question, and it's going to take me a second or two to sort of queue up where I'm going with this. But one thing I'll start off by saying is I agree completely with Vice Chair Arenas with regards to the housing crisis, with regards to Sacramento's expectations of its cities that include Gilroy, Morgan Hill, my city, Sunnyvale, San Jose, the counties. This is the real deal. And as part of reviewing the merits of the application that is in front of us, I found myself looking at the California Government Code that your city attorney might be familiar with. This is something called the Knox-Cortese-Herzberg Act. It's sort of the guiding law for all 58 LAFCOs in the state of California. And one of the pieces of CKH, Government Code 56668, if you will, City Attorney, tells us the 17 things that LAFCOs should consider when thinking about the merits of an application. And I'll give you one of them, which really got me to thinking about your housing element. It's item M of this lengthy list, and it says, consider the merits of the application to the extent which the proposal will affect a city or cities and the county in achieving their respective fair share of the regional housing needs as determined by the appropriate council of governments consistent with blah, 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 elsewhere in the government code. This gets me, Ms. McCormick, to thinking about the city of Gilroy's draft housing element, which I view as essentially a contract between the city of Gilroy and the state of California. Just like Sunnyvale's is a contract between Sunnyvale and Sacramento. That's how I view it. And LAFCO is not a party to your draft housing element. So I can see your draft housing element, but I'm not a party to it. And as I read your draft housing element, which I feel pretty sure is going to become your adopted housing element in due course, I'm of the belief that the city of Gilroy tells the state of California that you can do your RENA numbers over the next 8 years within your current city limits. Do you have the same impression of your draft housing element in that regard, Ms. McCormick, as I do?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay, got it. And I'll share with my colleagues, right, of the whole tornado of policies that California wants us as LAFCO commissioners to look at in judging the merits of an application. That fact is foremost in my mind, and I just wanted to share that with you. Okay, thank you very much for answering that question. I'm going to do another scan here for microphone lights, and I'm seeing none. Thank you again, Ms. McCormick, for your presentation. I really appreciate it, and we're going to move on now in the public hearing, and our representatives of the two developers have a total amount of 7 minutes to come speak to the LAFCO board. Recording Secretary Emmanuel, here's what I want you to do. We're going to split this 7 minutes into half. So I want you to give me 3.5 minutes on the clock, please, and each of our two applicants will have 3.5 minutes each. And the first speaker card I have is M.J. Frankel. And Mr. Frankel, that individual will be followed by Mark Hewell. So Mr. Frankel, looking forward to hearing from you, and you have 3.5 minutes.
I'm actually going to yield some of my time to our civil engineer as well, so just so you're aware.
Wonderful.
Esteemed LAFCO commissioners, my name is MJ Frankel. I'm here today representing Rent Investors, a dedicated residential developer and property owner with a vested interest in the City of Gilroy's Urban Service Area Amendment. For the past 2 decades, Rent Investors has diligently collaborated with the City of Gilroy staff. If the Urban Service Area Amendment is granted, it would indeed bring substantial advantages to the community, including not only new housing options and affordable housing, but also vital infrastructure improvements and an overall revitalization to the area, including kickstarting the development of road improvements to Christopher High School, addressing the unfinished and unsafe conditions of Wren Avenue, by completing road improvements across from a city school site and in allowing numerous small parcels bordering the current city limits to get off septic sewage treatment, and to name a few. Most importantly, and identified by the Commission earlier, in light of our region's ongoing housing crisis, we must proactively work together to find solutions. We need homes in this region. The need for homes in this region has become and will become an even more pressing issue with the impending completion of Gilroy's 2 largest projects, Hecker Pass and Glen Loma. Unlike the unutilized and remote hillside properties included in LAFCO's vacant land inventory, with no guarantee they will build, as development on such sites is often cost prohibitive, if this application is approved, we do intend to build approximately 100 homes on our site alone. Additionally, we understand the urgency of below market rate housing to address the affordable housing shortage. And I assure you that any residential development in this area will adhere to Gilroy's housing policy, with at least 15% of homes built designated as below market rate affordable units, typically sold at significant loss to developers. Further, as city staff indicated, they will require a specific plan to be complete for the Northern Neighborhood District in order for development of properties under review for this urban service area to be completed. And as Cindy expressed earlier, this process could take years to complete, thus significantly reducing the city's vacant land inventory and such, and we urgently urge the initiation of this process now to fulfill the community's housing growth needs effectively and avoid a potential lack of housing needs and housing in the future. Additionally, it must be conveyed that this specific plan process will require a larger developer with a larger parcel, like ourselves, to initiate this process and help front some of the costs of this work. And in regards to Commissioner Melton's comments, my fear is that if only smaller southern parcels are included in the urban service area expansion, my fear is that the required work in order to eventually develop and improve this area will be cost prohibitive and never be complete. The proposed Gilroy Urban Service Area Amendment has the potential to bring positive benefits to our community, and therefore we seek your support and endorsement for this crucial endeavor. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'd like to yield the remainder of my, I believe Mark would probably yield the remainder of his time too after he's complete, to Gloria Ballard, our civil engineer.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Next up is Mark Hewell. Emmanuel, can you give me 4 minutes on the clock, please? Can you give me 4 minutes on the clock, please? Please go ahead, Mr. Hewell. Nice to see you.
Hi, commissioners and staff. I'm Mark Hewell, one of the property owners of the proposed USA amendment. I was born and raised in Gilroy and still reside there. We believe our amendment should be approved for the following reasons. One, the properties are well within the urban growth boundary voted in by the citizens of Gilroy in 2016. Two, the properties have remained fallow for at least 25 years and are not viable for farming due to the lack of any agricultural wells on the property or their access for farm equipment other than on city streets, and noise and dust pollution adjacent to existing subdivisions within the city limits. Three, there are many old wells and septic tanks within these properties that will be eliminated with future development and connection to city services. The city has stated it can adequately provide all city services and utilities to support the development of these properties. Number five, all of the properties are within walking distance to County Transit Line 68 that goes south to Gilroy Transit Station and north to the Diridon Station. Six, all of the properties are within walking distance to Rod Kelly Elementary School, Christopher High School, and a major city park. The development will complete curb, gutter, sidewalk, and bike lanes along Wren Avenue and Vickery Lane, ensuring pedestrian and bicycle safety. Number eight, the development will provide desperately needed moderate-priced single-family homes for the average buyer and will also be required to provide 15% of the homes to be for low-income families. The properties are surrounded by city limits on 70% of the perimeter. They are adjacent to existing subdivisions with dead-end streets and utility stubs stopping at their property lines. This development is textbook infill. It is clearly not urban sprawl. Glen Loma Ranch and Hecker Pass specific plan will be completed within 3 years, leaving a void of available land for single-family homes. Even if approved today, it'll be 5 to 7 years and many layers of review, including an EIR and a specific plan of the northwest quadrant, including many properties before development could even begin. This is the only logical area for the city of Gilroy to expand. Please approve this USA amendment. And I don't know if anybody could see, but all the blue is city limits. The little bit of yellow here is the proposed application. And as you can see, that is not leapfrog development. It is classic infill, and there is no urban sprawl on that application. Thank you, and I yield my time.
Thank you very much. Civil engineer, I'm sorry, you can come on up here. Emmanuel, can you give me 3 minutes on the clock, please? Please go ahead. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chairperson Melton and Commissioners. My name is Gloria Ballard. I'm a planner, principal with MH Engineering. We represent the applicants. The exhibit I gave you is handed out is similar to the one you reviewed in June with some minor additions. The yellow outline is the requested amendment. The black outline is the existing city limits. Areas labeled Christopher High School is 1,707 students. At the top of the page labeled D. School E and F are elementary schools with another 1,400 students. Public parks are shown as I, J, K, and L, all within bike riding distances. Farrell Park I is actually across the street from this proposal. This exhibit displays bus services and city services. Parcels labeled B are on septic systems and water wells. Most important is the condition of Wren Avenue. Currently, it has half-street improvements on the east side, curb gutter sidewalk, and it has a bike lane. The opposite side has no improvements. Everybody is trying to get into the same spot. It's a very dangerous street to walk or to ride on. On a tour of the site Sunday, I would like to report that homes in the city response on permits and process, which were described by staff as too speculative, were actually pouring foundations. So that's a very plus note. I should also explain that Measure H included this area in the urban growth boundary. It passed in 2016 by a vote of over 11,000 people. Gilroy Planning staff recommended approval of this amendment. The Planning Commission voted unanimous approval of this amendment. City Council voted also unanimous approval to bring it to LAFCO. In the numerous LAFCO applications that I have filed, this is one of the most attractive with the infill requirements. It has utilities already at the site. The schools are there. The services are there. It has city on 3 sides. Those that recall Morgan Hill and Gilroy's criteria for infill, it had to have city on 2 sides with some explanation for the 3rd side. In summary, it is a benefit to the community. It makes for a healthier environment. It makes for a safer environment. It is infill. I respectfully request the approval of option 2A on page 3 of 5 of today's agenda, and 2B, acceptance of LAFCO staff's CEQA findings on page 4 of 5. Thank you, commissioners, and I'd like to thank everybody for their generous time and the most polite, courteous staff in this county. LAFCO is very, very courteous. We appreciate this time. Thank you very
Wonderful.
much. Are there any questions of me?
We'll keep going. Thank you so very much for your presentation. I appreciate it.
My office prepared the exhibit in front of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Okay, we're going to keep moving forward with the public hearing. Next up is an opportunity here to hear from our members of the public. First up, we're going to go with members of the public who are here in person. I have 4 requests to speak forms. Emmanuel, can you tell me how many raised hands you see on Zoom right now? 2? Okay, very good. So each speaker is going to have 3 minutes. Our first in-person speaker is Zach Hilton, and that individual will be followed by Alice Kaufman. Councilmember Hilton, welcome to Santa Clara LAFCO.
Thank you. Hello, Commission Chair, members, staff, and the public. I am Zach Hilton, Gilroy City Council member, and I'm supportive of LAFCO's staff recommendation to deny this application. What has Gilroy been doing over the last 150 years and since 1963 when LAFCO was formed? We built out our city well beyond the current availability density of our downtown and transit corridors to allow only single-family homes, and now 75% of our land is single-family. Gilroy can't grow or consider itself equitable and diversified in housing type when 75% of our land is zoned for single-family. We zoned our city where our own children can't afford to buy a $1 million single-family home. We have space, and we don't have spaces to rent, and have added to our income inequalities. We are decades behind in housing production because of past constraints, lack of programs, policies, and funding. In the last 150 years, we built 56 farm worker housing units and only 39 supportive housing units. This may have worked in the past, but now these homes are out of reach for most families. We need to course correct and continue to create a diversified housing stock to meet the needs of our residents. Data from our housing element shows that 21% of households are extremely low income, making less than 30% of AMI. 38% of our population is ages 24 years or younger. They live, play, go to school, and work in Gilroy. Our draft housing element will create programs to build missing middle housing. This is in addition to staff's effort in developing an inclusionary housing ordinance requiring a percentage of affordable homes in each development. I commend Gilroy staff for making the corrections and strengthening our programs while implementing them into our future work plan since our first draft housing element was released. We have 40 opportunity sites identified in our housing element that were approved by our Planning Commission and City Council recently. They will all be built for multifamily units. We have the current capacity to build over the next 8 years with more sites that were not even listed on the sites inventory and several that were taken off. And the Rent Investors Project is not listed on the housing element. We are working on breaking down barriers and not adding to them, making it impossible for us to maintain our streets and collect enough property tax on single-family homes to fund basic public services and infrastructure. Having a community facilities district fee added to the Rent Investors Project, property taxes, because the city can't afford to maintain them, will only further push out the natural affordability of these units. It took us decades to reach this imbalance of single-family to multifamily, and it's going to take us decades to balance that out. Most importantly, my daughter's generation doesn't have a place right now to live in Gilroy. 38% of our population is 24 years or younger. I want you to remember that. What we have promised our residents and the state HCD is that we will focus on building out our current land that is not focused on sprawl and single-family homes. The recent implementation of AB 2011 and SB 6 will allow for residential mixed-use housing along portions of our underutilized downtown commercial corridor to put people into walkable and bikeable neighborhoods near transit and jobs. which will further increase housing focused on infill. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Hilton. Our next speaker is Alice Kaufman. That individual is followed by Jordan Grimes.
Good afternoon, Chair Melton, Vice Chair Arenas, and Commissioners. My name is Alice Kaufman, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director with Green Foothills. I want to start out by saying I'm really kind of angry. I've gotten really kind of angry sitting in the audience listening to representatives for the city and for the developers describe this parcel as infill. This is not infill. The definition of infill is really simple. It does not include land that is outside of a city boundary. In fact, it doesn't even include all of land that's within a city boundary. It's about land that is concentrated near a city center. That's what infill is. So I just want to get that out of the way. So the proposal that's in front of you is really a relic of the past. It's pushing out the boundaries of cities in order to put new development there. It's how we ended up with the land use patterns that we have today. Sprawling, automobile-centric residential areas with little to no public transit because it is extremely difficult to provide efficient public transit to low-density areas. And LAFCOs were created to address this problem and to stop the habits of approving endless sprawl. If we want to have climate-resilient cities with vibrant, walkable neighborhoods, we can't keep on defaulting to this old pattern. We need to focus growth in our infill areas, which means downtowns, which means transit-oriented centers. And that's where we can build housing that will be affordable to people of all income levels so that we can begin to address the inequitable development patterns of the past. Now, I just got back from a trip to Copenhagen to visit family. And Copenhagen is famous as a model of compact, dense urban development that also has vibrant public spaces, urban parks, and a high quality of life for its residents. And of course, what many people know Copenhagen for is its ubiquitous bicycle culture and infrastructure. 40% of the Copenhagen residents get around via bicycle. But here's the thing. It wasn't always that way. Back in the 60s and the 70s, Copenhagen was well on its way to becoming the same kind of car-centric city as any American city. The public squares were used as parking lots, and the streets didn't have the bike lanes that they have today. It was a deliberate planning choice for Copenhagen to prioritize dense, compact, urban infill development, to not build new highways for cars, and instead to fund a well-functioning public transit system, to focus new infrastructure spending on revitalizing the city center, rather than on encouraging the city's wealthiest residents to move out of the city and into sprawling suburbs. Copenhagen is about to become the world's first capital city to meet a goal of becoming 100% carbon neutral within a few years. I'm not saying it's going to be easy for American cities to become like Copenhagen or that it can happen overnight, but one thing is for sure, it will never happen if we go in the exact opposite direction. And if we continue to make decisions about land use development that move our cities more towards car-dependent development and away from infill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Jordan Grimes, and that individual is followed by Raja Alluri.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Jordan Grimes. I am the South Bay Resilience Manager for Greenbelt Alliance. We are an environmental nonprofit operating in the 9-county Bay Area. At the last convening on this issue, I spoke a little bit about California's unfortunate history of sprawl development, and I don't want to belabor that point, but the negative impacts of that growth pattern over the years, especially in places like Gilroy, are extremely stark. Things like lack of permeability, leading to worsening urban heat island effects and flooding, increasing vehicle miles traveled, and significant commute times and greenhouse gas emissions, directly driving our climate crisis, and overextension and consumption of city services, leading to fiscal hardship on city coffers. And I will say that, yes, this parcel has all the characteristics and is absolutely sprawl. I want to focus today on the question of needs and requirements, as has been discussed for those living in Gilroy, for those who want to live there, and for the state, a topic that has come up repeatedly this afternoon. 2 weeks ago, the state of California once again rejected Gilroy's housing element draft. Key in that denial were the city's failure to adequately analyze constraints on infill development, as well as assess and implement policies to affirmatively furthering fair housing, as required by AB 686. Annexation of this property will do nothing to change that rejection or future rejections by the state of California. That is because state requirements are now based on much more than sheer capacity calculations of new housing availability. If Gilroy wants to truly meet their housing needs as well as state requirements, the city needs to remove myriad existing barriers to infill development in the city that make it difficult to build sustainably, as they should be doing. And there are numerous ways of doing that, which many neighboring jurisdictions have done or are in the process of doing. Eliminating or reducing parking requirements like San Jose, rezoning like Mountain View and Sunnyvale. The city can and should enact local streamlining programs to shorten and simplify the development process for new infill housing, remove subjective standards, increase floor area ratios and height limits, rezone considerably in downtown, which encompasses much more than just the historic district, as well as along Monterey Road, and frankly, so much more. Barriers to infill housing in Gilroy and beyond were put in place by people. These constraints are artificial, they are removable by people, in fact, by us. Land is finite and we should be building up, not out. I want to make it clear it is entirely possible for Gilroy and other cities to meet state requirements, meet local needs, and protect our environment at the same time. We need to be planning for infill instead of sprawl. We need to be planning for the future and not for the past. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Final speaker card that I have for in-person speakers is Raja Alluri.
Hello, my name is Raja Alluri. Good afternoon, respected commissioners, staff, and everyone else in attendance. I'm here to express my support for the proposed incorporation of the vacant land into the Gilroy City. I am the owner of a small property in the current proposal. My property has Gilroy City streets on two sides, a rural residential house on the third side, and a properly paved walking, biking trail on the fourth side. So the land in question cannot be used for agriculture due to its location, surrounded by housing on three sides, and a properly paved walking trail, which is used by citizens of Gilroy every day on another side adjacent to the water canal. I'm keen to build on the land because that's the best use of the property and is currently unused. I'm having trouble keeping people dump trash and cleaning up even after fencing the perimeter every month. However, without annexation, I would have to resort to using a septic tank for sewage and a well for water, which is not ideal for anyone. I need to dig just 6 feet to connect to city services. The city has made it clear that I cannot connect to their services unless the application is approved by LAFCO. Most of the parcels in this proposal are very small, and we do not have the organizational capabilities or resources to make it all the way to LAFCO next time by ourselves. I spoke to a couple of other small property owners in this proposal, and they are very hesitant to even come and speak in front of LAFCO. We do want to enjoy this property, and we will have to build and whatever is possible in the current situation, which is not good for me, nor the public, nor the environment. The development aligns with the principles of orderly growth by promoting infill development, which is located near existing urban areas and services. The approach reduces the need for new infrastructure and promotes sustainable growth. Failing to approve this proposal would mean missing a golden opportunity to create a high-density housing in a planned area in an efficient and sustainable manner while preserving farmland. Supporting the initiative would provide affordable housing to residents struggling to find housing in the current market. It would stabilize the community, promote growth, and improve overall prosperity. It is important to note that annexing the land would mean approving the right project a little bit ahead of time, which would have a positive impact in the long run. The benefit of this project far outweigh the arguments made against annexation. I respectfully request the members of LAFCO Commission to take the practical approach and approve the proposal for greater good of the society. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Alluri. That was our final speaker card for in-person requests to speak. I'm now going to hand it over to our recording secretary. Emmanuel, do we still have 2 raised hands? Okay, if you can walk us through that, please.
The next speaker joining by Zoom is Gilroy Mayor Murray Blackley. Mayor Blackley, please accept that you have 3 minutes.
Hello?
Marie, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yes, this is Mayor Marie Blankley, City of Gilroy. This property should be approved for annexation today because it is hindering the very orderly and planned urban expansion LAFCO is meant to promote. Currently, the City of Gilroy cannot fill this hole that prevents the completion of streets and bicycle and pedestrian paths that currently dead end from fully developed neighborhoods around it, and inhibits the city's ability to orderly connect neighborhoods between Christopher High School and Antonio Del Bono Elementary School. LAFCO's concern for city service capacity is most welcome and certainly something that local jurisdictions have tried for years to prioritize when addressing growth. But the state's intervention and demands for housing without commensurate funding for city services forces us all to make adjustments when balancing the two. This application is our attempt to prepare for needed land capacity that can accommodate housing production. I wish to point out that the 400+ acres of undeveloped land adjacent to the Gilroy Gardens theme park that's being counted as vacant land capacity is not suitable for housing. It's owned by the City of Gilroy as part of the 2005 purchase from Michael Bonfani when Bonfani Gardens theme park was in demise. Of the 536 acres purchased by the city, 70 is the amusement park and 36 is unimproved land near Highway 152. The remainder is the mountains. The entire property has gone through the Surplus Lands Act, with the only interest being from Santa Clara County to extend Mount Madonna Park. This property is not housing material. It is mountainous open space and should not be considered in the 5-year land inventory that Gilroy needs to meet state goals for housing production in the future. When you exclude that land, you see that this application is exactly what's needed for orderly and planned growth. While this unannexed piece remains among already developed neighborhoods, we cannot move forward with grant applications for parks, recreation, bike and ped improvements to the area that sits between 2 schools. Please consider what you do here today that would allow us to simply begin the process that takes years in the making to infill space that was developed that has been developed all around it already. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Blankley.
The next speaker is Leo. Please accept that you have 3 minutes.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, my name's Dion Bracco. I'm born and raised in Gilroy. I'm a business owner and I'm a Gilroy City Council member. I want to echo what the mayor said. And this area belongs in the city. It's a couple little pockets within the city that actually hurt us because the closest fire station is Sunrise. It can't respond because it has to go all the way around because the streets don't connect. So we have to bring in fire from Los Animas Station, which takes longer. Another thing that would really help is we have a beautiful school in that area, Del Bono School, that is sitting vacant because there wasn't enough kids anymore in that neighborhood to keep it going. This would go a long way to getting that school open and hiring the school teachers back. So I just want to voice my support for this project. I think it would finish off an area. You don't hear anybody from Gilroy calling in against this. It's just people from the Bay Area are against it. So I urge you to support this and approve it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Bracco. And Emmanuel, do we have any further raised hands on Zoom? Okay, very good. Here's what we're going to do now. We're going to go ahead and close the public hearing. We're going to bring it back to the LAFCO commissioners to open commission discussion. And sort of, colleagues, my thoughts on this process is maybe we can spend a few minutes doing a temperature check or a straw poll, if you will, of where the commissioners are at on all of this. And I'd be interested in hearing the thoughts of the individual commissioners before we get into any motion making. So that's how I would propose that we go forward. I'll scan for microphone lights turned on, or I would be happy to go first and just launch with some thoughts on all of this. So I'll go ahead and do that. Some things that I've had on my mind as I measure the merits of the application versus relevant law and relevant policy. Like I said a few minutes ago, I really feel like I see three different parcels or chunks of land here that all act a little bit differently. If there was a motion on the floor for south of Tatum Avenue, this one that's shaped like a backward C, it's the southernmost chunk here. What I said previously is, to my way of thinking, that's the opposite of urban sprawl. Maybe we call that infill, but I refer to it as the opposite of sprawl. I would be comfortable with that piece being part of alternative 2. Then I draw my attention to the northernmost piece, this rectangle. Staff calls it Area B, but the very far northern piece of this, I sit and I think to myself briefly, I think Gilroy has a draft housing element where they say we can do our entire arena number within the current existing city limits. That's foremost on my mind. And I also think about just the mission of LAFCO as described by the state of California, one of which is to preserve open space. And I see on my 2 site visits to this area, I see that as a lot of open space. So that would be an area where I would favor alternative 1, which is to deny the USA expansion. And then that leaves the big piece in the middle, south of the northernmost rectangle, but north of Tatum Avenue. And my bias is that would be part of alternative 1 for the reasons that I described. It would be to deny the USA expansion, but I'm much closer to being on the fence for that, and I would love to hear what my colleagues have to think. So I'm trying to say for the middle piece, I could go either way, but I have a bias for alternative 1. I respect that my colleagues may very well say, I want all of this to be alternative 1, and some of my colleagues might say, I want all of this to be alternative 2, and that's why I'm really interested in just doing a temperature check here to see where we're all at before any motions are made. Commissioner Kamei, turning it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to my colleagues who acknowledge that, perhaps either a condition of approval or something like that might be an idea. I know some of us have done it in other arenas. LAFCO is very different. I understand the explanation that it is not part of this application. But when you think of the goal of LAFCO in terms of being able to prevent sprawl and what have you, we know that in the past there has been sprawl, and there could have been good reasons for that or not or what have you, but that is in the past. We have an opportunity to potentially correct some of that and really allow lands to be in open space in perpetuity, either through detachment out of the city limits, creating a conservation easement if Gilroy wants to. I don't even get the impression that Gilroy is even interested in having it brought forth to their city council. So that's the impression I get. Now, it's just an idea, But I think that when you think about how the city wants to grow in an orderly, planned fashion, if you decrease areas that you're not going to utilize or are underutilized and go to areas that are more appropriately situated to be utilized, to me it makes sense. So I know that it's a lot of work, it is not part of this application, but I do think that for perhaps in the future, it is something that we should think about. We should think about, and Nalima gave us the process of which and it sounds very complicated, but I also know that these are lands that the city of Gilroy owns in its entirety. So you're not talking about having to go to a lot of different property owners or what have you to worry about, opposition or anything like that. They own it, and they have the ability to make those decisions. It is up to them, right, to bring that application forward. I will say that should the commissioners decide not to, well, let me put it this way. Should the commissioners decide to support the staff recommendation, one of the things that I became aware of is that you can only bring one application to LAFCO, like in that year time frame. I would ask that if it were to go down as, we're not going to allow this to move forward, that we would allow a waiver for them to come back if they think this whole vacant land situation can be remedied by allowing areas that are not as appropriate, but are in the city limits to be either detached or conservation easement or do something there to be able to allow other lands to be brought into the city limits. So that's kind of where I am. I know that it is not perfect. It's not before us, but I think that I'm trying to find a way both to understand the need for the growth in their city limits, but also to correct some other areas that are in the city limits, and they still have an ability to grow there and to build and do whatever, since it is in the city limits. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Thank you, Commissioner Kamei. And before we go to Commissioner Trumbull, I just wanted to acknowledge your thoughtful comments. I appreciate it. And to replay some of the things that I heard, Commissioner, I heard detachment and or conservation easements as potential future tools if the collective will of the LAFCO was alternative one, staff recommendation. You might like to see a waiver of the necessary clock time period, and then perhaps the city of Gilroy might be able to come back with a reapplication that includes one of these tools in the toolkit of detachment or conservation easement. I hope I heard all of that reasonably correctly.
Yes, and that would allow the LAFCO staff to also do the necessary analysis to ensure that we are sticking to our, what our responsibility is.
Wonderful, thank you. So next up is Commissioner Trumbull and then Vice Chair Arenas, please.
So I thought Commissioner Kamei's detachment suggestion was a great idea. In general, I'm leaning against the proposal by the city and in support of the staff recommendation. I particularly want to highlight page 2 of our 25-page agenda packet. I think it's an addition where it says LAFCO staff provided a definition of vacant land and explained the methodology to the city for preparing a vacant lands inventory. And then the next paragraph is the first 2 vacant land inventories submitted by the city were mostly consistent with LAFCO's definition. However, the city opted to prepare a 3rd and a 4th. And I take that to mean that they probably weren't happy with the results of the first 2. But I don't feel much guilt about denying the application when they seem to knowingly wanted to bring up a proposal which they knew was going to be recommended against. So that's a quick summary of what I'm thinking.
Right on. Thank you, Commissioner Trumbull, for your comments. I appreciate it. Next up is Vice Chair Arenas.
Thank you. Well, on the heels of that comment, I also do want to remind my colleagues that we don't have a written policy on vacant lands or infill. And I think for the moment, I think infill is considered, and I just want to clarify this with the LAFCO staff, is infill, would you describe that as land that is already annexed by the respective city?
Correct. Development of lands within a city's within the city's city limits.
Right. Wonderful. And so I think when we have that kind of definition, then we need to, one, memorialize it. We need to make sure that it's written somewhere, and that we need to also follow what the civil grand jury report asked of our LAFCO staff to do more than 15 years ago, and that is to figure out some of these definitions and write them down. I think that's only fair for our applicants and also for us as commissioners, because this puts me in a very in a conundrum, really. When I see an area as infill, yet the unofficial policy doesn't see this as infill, it creates a natural point of disagreement, because there's cities, I represented the city as a council member for 6 years, and the North Coyote Valley is within the city of San Jose's limits, and that would be considered infill. Do we treat that as infill? I mean, you say that to any environmentalist, that's crazy. But technically, according to LAFCO's definition, that is infill. But there's part of judgment and criteria that we as policymakers and representatives and commissioners, that we must make a judgment call. Would we ever consider the North Coyote Valley, because it is technically infill, accept an application and approve it? I'm going to say, it's probably safe to say that none of us here would ever approve that, including myself. But I'm just illustrating that we must make some personal judgments about some of the proposals that are coming in. Now, I'm open to having some sort of solution. I don't see everything as black and white, and we should never see anything as black and white. I think because there's a lack of, one, definition, and two, application process, that we need to use our own criteria in terms of, and a collective criteria. We need to start creating a collective criteria according to what we have before us. And I think this project, this application has done their part. I think they've done enough to address some of the underlying issues that LAFCO has raised. I think that should be factored into our decisions. I think that they also looked at the policy in terms of the 5-year supply, and whether they used a different methodology or not, we don't have it in writing. We don't have it in writing. Or do we have this in writing?
We don't. We have other applications that have been reviewed under the same standard, but
Right.
we don't have it as a policy.
Right. So my master's in public administration. My focus is always to follow policy. I am a public administrator at heart. I'm a public servant at heart. I'm not the best friend of land use developers. You can ask anybody. They would not say that I am their best friend because I've voted against many of their projects throughout my service. But I do like process, and I like a process that's fair. And we must act accordingly. And I think that this application process, this application has already gone through enough. They've demonstrated how they're going to deliver services. And I know that might not be enough for LAFCO staff, but I think there isn't going to be an application or an applicant that comes in that does all of the work, millions of dollars in terms of investment, to see whether we will be okay with it. It's just never going to happen. And so I think we need to take a look at how are we going to create some clarity for applicants so that they know what to comply with and that the measuring stick doesn't change. And that we also take a look at what that HCD definition is and what our cities, all of our cities and all of our, in our county are using in order to meet their arena goals. And of course, you know, the city manager said that they are meeting their, they will meet their arena goals within their city limits. They couldn't submit an application if she had said no, right? But what they're trying to do is take into account that their vacant land inventory isn't as viable as we think it is. On paper, maybe it's viable, right? That 500 acres that we said around Gilroy Gardens, that's all hillside. I don't know that that's ideal housing location. We certainly don't want the hillsides built out. I don't know that I would be a proponent of that particular proposal. I don't know that I would want to demolish any historic buildings downtown or discourage any of those businesses that are doing well downtown in order to replace them with some housing projects. So I'm asking my colleagues to really use your judgment in terms of what you think is meeting a threshold here, and I think this application has met a certain threshold. I think they've met they've answered the question about the urban service area, and that they can meet the demand once this is built out. And I think that we need to take a look at our policies to see whether we could naturally discourage certain kind, we know we need to because that's part of our role, to discourage certain urban sprawl. But what is urban sprawl and what is infill and what is viable vacant land? And so I really like this idea about maybe taking a look at a portion of these areas as you segmented them, Chair. I think you said the C area, the middle area, I don't know how we'll call them, but I guess the larger area, excluding the top rectangle. I would be open to approving that. I don't know if there is an absolute no on that last piece. I just think that this application they've demonstrated how they're going to carry this out in a way that is diligent for the city and its residents and responsible. And so I really do think that we have an obligation to uphold the policies as we understand them and make sure that we are diligent about not being subjective, whether we like a particular project or not. I don't have any connection with any of the developers. I have not received any contributions. I'm going to say this up front. I've done, there's no connection with me and this development. I am a very much a stickler about process, and I'm a stickler about making sure that we have the same rules apply to every project, whether I like it or not. And I'd love for my colleagues to do the same. And because in the future I will have a lot more projects coming in because I have the largest district and the most open land. I foresee this as being a challenge for us, so I want us to consider whether this gets approved or not. I do want us to take a look at, in the future, Chair, how we can create a study session so that we can update the LAFCO work plan and include some of these policy updates and clarify and really improve what the vacant land methodology is, and some of the questions that were raised throughout this conversation. So anyways, I'll hand it over to my colleagues, but I think you all know where I stand in terms of this project. I see this as an answer to our housing crisis, and I think the applicant has done a fair job in terms of answering how they are going to comply with the services that are going to be rendered because of the increase of housing.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. I'll jump in before we go to Commissioner Kishimoto with a quick personal fun fact, which is before I met with Mayor Blankley on Friday in the great city of Gilroy, Russ Melton's definition of infill, based on my experience in Sunnyvale, was tear down an existing building and put up a new building in its place. So I'm with you all the way, Vice Chair. We seem to have multiple definitions of just one term, infill. And then just to throw out a work plan thing, it exists on the LAFCO work plan currently, and I desire to get to it. It's a comprehensive update of LAFCO policies, of these written policies. And won't we come to a common definition of infill? I look forward to working with you on that, Vice Chair, very much. I've got Commissioner Kishimoto, then Commissioner Lee, and then Commissioner Bell. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Please.
Well, thank you. I appreciate all the commissioners' thoughtful comments. And I'll just kind of preface my comments by also acknowledging, the progress made by Gilroy, all the work on the master plans, and so I know it's been a lot of work, and that I also agree with the Vice Chair's comments about greater clarity on terms and definitions. And I would say it's not just for housing, but even on farmland, for example, there's many, four or five definitions of what constitutes farmland. And is it currently farmed? Is it currently irrigated? What is the state of the soil? And so there's, this is obviously was farmland. It's been vacant for 20 years. Does that mean it's no longer viable farmland? There's a lot of definitions of farmland. I've read the entire staff report and the application at least twice, and also took the time to dive into some of the master plans that Gilroy has written. And I guess I have to say I still come down largely on this in favor of the staff recommendation. I would be open to the chair's idea about this breaking out the part that's south of Tatum as a possibility. And the reasons for this is really just, considering the factors that LAFCO takes into consideration, and especially the fiscal and environmental factors, the impact of changing the urban service plan. And, to me, it seems like it would be, we're just digging the hole deeper in terms of in the wrong direction with this application. So those are my comments.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. Next up is Commissioner Lee and then Commissioner Bell.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, I just want to say thank you to the staff and both our LAFCO staff and our Gilroy staff has done a very good comprehensive work for this. So this has been a lot of hard work being put into it, and also for the applicant for coming back again with the very thoughtful application here. When I look at the map itself initially, I just say, look, this is like a little U here. It looks like a logical growth area. It's flat. It's between Monterey and Santa Teresa, and we need RENA numbers. So that, to me, at first, I was like, this doesn't seem to be that hard to approve. But then, at the same time, we also have other considerations. I mean, the fact that it's not been farmed for 25 years certainly is one. But the other areas that I just want to mention is the ideas of detachment or easement as mentioned by our commissioner, Kim A, is something that I really think we need to look into because of the fact that if Gilroy is willing to or is not able to build those spaces in the incorporated area by Gilroy Gardens and Hillside as mentioned by Mayor Blankley so well put, I think we just need to put the money where the mouth is. Such a place is like, look, no, we're not going to build that anymore, so let's not calculate those 5 years based on land that would never be built, right? Because the whole reason why this is being recommended for denial by staff is the fact that they say, hey, there's more than 5 years of land, but the thing is, these land just will never be built. Why do you even include it in there and make these numbers basically meaningless? So I think if we could actually make that type of a commitment or whatever, so whatever vote is today, if somehow this is not being approved today, I certainly think that would be something very important that could be brought back to us. And I like the idea from Vice Chair about saying, if this does not get approved and they come back to us, let's not make them go to the back of the queue, have to picture fees. Let's not do that. We've done all those hard work already. Let's get those in there, but I think these are type of consideration that we could look into. What I think the attachment might be very complicated, as mentioned earlier, but I'm certainly open to ideas, any ways to make it easier. I'm not a fan of red tape, so there's some type of easement or whatnot that the city of Gilroy is able to make a declaration of some sort to say those lands will not be used. We could delete it off that calculation. I think that would be very helpful on making that calculation correct. Number one. Number two is, I did hear from some of the comments, including Councilmember Hilton, about the high density housing need in the whole county, really, but certainly in Gilroy. The 56 acres for 304 units, that's fairly low density. We're talking about 6 to 7 units per acre. And I know you mentioned you want to put higher density in there, which is great, thank you. But I don't necessarily believe that every single affordable housing unit or low, high density is going to be a money loser. And I think there are ways that you can actually make the math work. So I really hope that you can go back and look at the numbers to make sure that we are building more housing. Because at the end of the day, I think if we do this wisely, I mean, it really is this between various housing units out there, a lot of single-family homes too, but the benefit that's bringing to the whole area, like you have mentioned, the applicants have mentioned, is going to help a lot regarding whether the high schools, whether it's some of the water lines, whether it's the safety of some of the roads, the sidewalks is being put in. I do believe that this can be a very positive project. And some of this obviously is not in the applicant's control regarding, if we could get some of these lands on the other area to be back in the detachment and incorporated easement. But I do think that if the numbers, so we keep going back to this 5-year business, and let's go back to that and see if we can get those numbers cleaned up. I do think this project can work if we could get those worked out. But that's what I'm leaning on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Lee, and I'm, if you don't mind, Supervisor, I'm sort of synthesizing my thoughts and want to make sure that I've understood the words that you're saying correctly as I'm taking notes here and trying to find some common ground between the 7 commissioners. I perceive, even though I didn't hear you say the words, I perceive that you're sort of leaning or tilting towards staff recommendation with a bias towards coming up with a workable solution using our toolbox. I feel like I heard the same words from Commissioner Kamei, and I just wanted to make sure that I'm grasping the reality that you're presenting. And I see you shaking your head up and down, and I really appreciate that. So next up, we're going to go to Commissioner Bell, and then we'll hear from alternate Commissioner Turner.
Okay, a couple comments. First of all, way back in ancient history in San Jose, the city of San Jose tried to build a 125,000 person new town on the northern part of Lake Anderson. And they annexed the Coyote Valley Monterey Road to put a sanitation sewer line down the middle of Monterey Road as far as they can get. And so they didn't want the rest of the Coyote Valley at that time because they didn't really want that development. They were really trying to get a boundary of an incorporated territory connected with the area around Lake Anderson. And today you see that the city of San Jose, still there's incorporated territory there. So I'm just, kind of responding to Mr. Favor. There was a lot of action and study on the Planning Commission in San Jose and the City Council in the 1970s. And since I joined the City of San Jose Planning Commission in 1976, folks, served for 4.5 years. Just give me a little history. So I've been around a while. Also just a member of the County Board of Supervisors and the City of San Jose urban policies that we had, I think there has to be clarity about what your urban boundaries is. And one of the things we did was to create the green belt around San Jose that created a clarity that maybe doesn't exist here. Okay, I'm just pointing this out. Okay, I'm also pointing out that another thing we did to establish a clarity about the boundaries is we created, for the county, we created an open space district. We said, okay, we're going to create an open space district. We have a member on the board here, Helen Chapman. Gilroy declined to join the open space district. It's the only city in the county that declined. Okay, so we went ahead and created it without Gilroy's, but we also did not prejudice ourselves to the extent that we didn't provide property in the South County and around Gilroy, correct? Am I correct on that? The Open Space District has done a great job on trying to preserve, and either on a permanent basis by fee simple property acquisitions or by conservation easements. You can do either. So Gilroy needs to, like we're talking about the confusion about the boundaries and all that, Gilroy needs to clarify and maybe tighten up what the boundaries are so we really know what the boundaries are and we have a consensus about it. And the way you do that is you create open space district, conservation easements, you create greenbelt policies and so forth. And I think a combination would help in this instance. Now, the other thing I'll comment about, so I think the open space issue is important. Okay, I'm just saying that. I mean, we can keep going up and, we have the soft tooth pattern of development. This property is in, this one is, and we can keep going up and up and up along the north and south of Gilroy until we're blue in the face and still annexed. And that's actually the way San Jose annexed. I'm just, giving you my history here, about how it happened in Edenvale. And it ends up being single-family homes. It doesn't end up being affordable housing. The next point I want to make is affordable housing. Yes, I was a member of the state legislature that co-authored the regional housing allocation. I did that. I admit it. I'm guilty. However, I'm guilty of doing the right thing because we needed to have some goals and we needed to share the goals. And when I was a member of the San Jose City Council and the Board of Supervisors, the predominant burden on providing the affordable housing was not in a lot of the other cities. I think some cities did. I'll point out the city of Sunnyvale and specifically Santa Clara also that worked hard. But the predominant affordable housing was done in the city of San Jose. Okay? So the idea of making sure that all the cities provide affordable housing, and I sense some resistance politically and maybe in a way with urban service, that housing is an urban service. Yes, it is. It's an urban service. It is the law. And I want to make sure that that's considered when we consider applications, okay? That has to be very tightly considered because it's going to get worse, folks, if you don't do your job. If you don't comply if you don't get approval of your housing plan, that's a problem. That's a problem. There should be, wait a minute, there should be like an alarm bell should go off, okay? You don't have a housing plan approved. Okay, and then the other one would be, I'll talk about surplus property. I've offered laws on surplus property. Surplus property law in California for affordable housing right now is under debate presently in the state legislature. And in a few weeks, there's going to be a new law. It's going to be basically, and I think the direction they're going is, if you have an affordable housing site that's a surplus property, we are going to try to expedite that site to make sure that you can build affordable housing. That's what the law is going to be. It's going on right now, and I could cite Senator Caballero's 1767 and Phil Ting's bill. Those are the two major bills. Even the Water District weighed in with our Assemblyman Cholera's 1469 that allows the Water District to build affordable housing with cooperation of the cities and the county to work on housing to deal with homeless population, and we have a lot of homeless population in our rivers and creeks and properties, and we want to complete our needed housing to provide them with housing, but also to finish the infrastructure, flood control improvements to avoid the floods that happened in the past. We want to fix that. So it's hard to fix those things when you have a bunch of people living in the creeks, and that's one of the goals. Now relative to your idea, the other thing representing sort of a view of water and water quality, which I am very concerned about here. The goal is to recycle all the water. There's going to be a direction to recycle the water as an urban service, okay? We have to kind of like look at that as what we want to encourage here in LAFCO. Okay, now, how do we do that? Well, we make sure that everybody's on the sanitary sewer system that it could be. And I noticed that there's a lot of properties here that are on septic tanks. Now, I don't know how old those septic tanks are. I guess they're probably kind of old. Maybe the planning department has a record of them. But we want to take the water, put it in the sanitation system. We want to put them into the sanitation system. We want to send it to the facility that Gilroy and Morgan Hill have, and we're building all those pipes. Believe me, we're spending tens of billions of dollars all over the South County putting in the purple recycled water pipe system in the to and from the treatment facility down there. And we're spending a lot of money and time doing that, and we want to make sure all our sanitation goes through there so we can recycle the water. And actually, the water recycled can be used for meeting our water needs, so we don't have to import as much from other areas like the Central Valley and the Delta, for example. So getting water recycling as a priority and as a water issue is important. So I'm saying that when you suggested that, I would look at not maybe the road, I'm like more looking at the channel. If you want to look at your map, probably would be something you can look at that way, okay? I think that water recycle, the septic tanks, if you look at this map they provided, thank you very much for doing that, shows the B areas. I think those are any septic system you want to, usually they have a temporal existence. They don't last forever. Okay, so you want to look at reducing that and putting it into recycling. Now, the recycled water is used for not only your community, it's used for your agricultural people, so we can provide water, that's able to be used in a recharge facility, so they can recharge and replenish the well water, because it goes into the ground, goes into those into the ground, and then it's pumped out through the wells. And that provides a ability to provide support long-lasting for agricultural uses, which I think it should be a goal of LAFCO, because we have LAFCO agricultural policies. So I think looking at, especially in the South County, but probably anywhere, using recycled water is a winner. Is a winner for all those reasons, for land use reasons, agricultural preserve reasons, supporting the existence of the community. I know we're all going to work hard to conserve water, but I think this is something to recognize. I hate to say it, but we need to tighten up these policies, both by LAFCO and probably the planning in the city of Gilroy, okay? The old ways aren't going to work. We have climate change coming. We have to, the council member's correct, we have to emphasize conserving, using less, higher density, transit, bicycling. Yes, that's what we got to do. I was totally amazed this weekend going to see the electric Caltrain. Isn't that great? Wasn't that an accomplishment we all had? It was so exciting to see those beautiful new trains. And guess what? The plan is to go down to Gilroy. And even Monterey and Salinas wants to join in and maybe extend them down there. And if we do the extension, it would get rid of noise, pollution, help the environment in the South County, and what an exciting prospect for a wonderful place to live. Okay, it already is a wonderful place to live, but what of an excitement that would be if we had that. It would show the world that we care about that. And the county doesn't put Gilroy, Morgan Hill area in a second-class status. They keep it up there at the top. We're going to do our best to help all communities, right? So anyway, so those are my thoughts. I think I kind of have a suspicion that those septic tanks are kind of end of life close or whatever, I would guess. I don't know if the staff has any information on that, but I think that's, if they are end of life close, I don't want them near my channel there. I see my channel. I'm like looking at, oh my God, we're going to have to do something there. But, you know, anytime you have a septic tank near a waterway, that's like, makes you nervous. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Commissioner. Really enjoyed hearing your thoughts, and I appreciate it for one. Before we get to alternate Commissioner Turner, let me offer to my colleagues here on the LAFCO Commission Russ Melton's sense of what I think I've heard so far. And to me, the goal is, colleagues, if we can come up with a motion that can get 4 yes votes, or 5 yes votes, or 6 yes votes, or 7 yes votes. That's the goal that I'm aiming for, but to get a motion that a majority of the LAFCO can vote yes on and that can carry the day. And once again, this is just my own sense. I apologize in advance if I'm misreading any tea leaves here. I feel like I see alternative 1 as a predominant consideration, the will of the LAFCO Commission, but that there might also be for south of the channel. I originally said south of Tatum Avenue, but I heard Commissioner Bell say south of the channel. And in a minute, I can have Dania bring up a map so that we can specifically look at all the exact parcels. So north of the channel might be alternative 1, deny the USA expansion. South of the channel might be alternative 2, accept the USA expansion. I've done some light advocacy for why I think that makes sense. And then Nilima and Josh, you don't know this yet, but I'm going to ask staff to see if they can come up with some words that could be bolted onto a motion about toolkit and the 1-year mandatory period of time. And if staff can give us a way that says, okay, for the piece that's alternative 1, we can bolt on a toolkit of easement or detachment and a waiver of a time frame, I'm going to hand that one over to staff and see if they can craft some language that could be bolted onto a motion. So just to summarize before we turn it over to alternative Commissioner Turner, alternative 1, north of the channel, that's to say no dice to the USA expansion. Alternative 2, south of the channel, that's to say okay to the USA expansion. And staff is going to hopefully give us some language about toolkit and waiver of subsequent timeframes for reapplication for the city of Gilroy. Thanks for listening. I appreciate the opportunity to share my comments, and let's hand it over to alternate Commissioner Turner.
Thank you, Chair. And Commissioner Beal, I just want to make sure you remember that the electrification ends at Tamian Station, and we get diesel in South County. So what we hope to see is within 5 years.
I'm very aware of that.
Yeah, we are pushing for the battery component. That would be something that can take place, but that's 5 years away. So
they're looking at a battery.
Yep,
like
battery operated from Tamian Station going south. So
I'll take you down to San Bernardino. They have a battery train down there. It's a metro.
yeah, that's what we're hoping to see
And
for.
I think
yeah.
that's the one to
Yep.
look at. It's a technology that's really good.
Yep, that's what we're hoping for. Thank you.
Commissioner Turner.
Yes, thank you. I think what we're seeing here is that while the application by Gilroy, or probably any city, is just not ever going to be perfect. We can pick it apart, we can find reasons why we should deny it, but I think what we're learning today is that on our part as an organization, things aren't perfect either. There's some confusion. There could be some misunderstanding, misinterpretation of what policies mean or what definitions are. I think what we're talking about here when we talk about the concern of the urban growth or sprawl, I think we were reminded last meeting that Gilroy has not put in an application for 10 plus years. There is no out-of-control sprawl coming out of South County. It's just not happening. For 10 years plus, there has not been an application that came from the city of Gilroy. So they're not going wild in Gilroy. They're not expanding their borders. They're not going crazy down there. And while I think it is important to correct the sins of the past, I would hope that the commissioners would consider not punishing South County, not in this case, not punishing Gilroy, for sprawl that has occurred in San Jose and north. I think there's a reason Gilroy is applying and wanting to have this accepted. I think when they mentioned, as Ms. McCormick mentioned, it does meet the three-step methodology. I didn't hear any reason why that didn't. I heard no pushback from anybody saying it doesn't. I think there should be consideration. The residents of Gilroy in 2016 did pass an urban growth boundary initiative. They are protected from sprawl because not only beyond that urban growth boundary, LAFCO has to be a part of that decision too. That is almost impenetrable. So for this consideration here, which again, we'll all have different, I think, definitions of what infill is, this is by all means, this is a textbook reason to approve. This is not a textbook sprawl, as many have tried to indicate in a letter penned by one person and 500 people copied and pasted. This is a textbook reason why this should be approved, and I would hope that the commissioners would indeed consider approving Gilroy's application. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Alternate Commissioner Turner. Let me check in with professional staff to see, Josh or Neelima, if you've been able to latch onto the request, or if you need a little more time, just please say so.
So just a clarification, this is for a motion to approve a portion of the proposal area, and then to do what?
Yes.
To come back with the rest of the area? Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying that this is, my understanding was that Commissioner Kameh was bringing up this idea of a conservation easement or a detachment in relation to a denial. So I'm a little bit confused, so if you could please clarify.
Happy to do my utmost to do that. And let me start off by saying, Neelima, I'm doing a trick that we do sometimes in Sunnyvale, which is we take, an idea, a kernel of an idea, and we hand it over to staff for a couple of minutes to sort of ferment the idea and come back with an awesome solution or an idea for the board to work with. So let's say, Josh and Neelima, that the will of the LAFCO is to say alternative 1 north of the channel and alternative 2 south of the channel. I'd still like to see if we can latch on to Commissioner Kameh's idea that I also heard endorsed by Commissioner Lee, which is find a way for the alternative 1 area north of the channel to be able to come back in a sooner time frame than is ordinarily allowed under Santa Clara LAFCO policy, and then also throw in some words about this toolkit about detachment, Josh, and or conservation easement as sort of a thing we would like to be explored as part of the accelerated timeline. I hope that's sort of getting across the way I'm saying that. Josh, if you have any thoughts, that would be great.
Chair, I do think I understand. I think we're working on a little bit of language, but might need 30 seconds or a minute just to.
We'll swing back over here to the
you.
commission. Take your time. Thank you very much. We're going to go next to Commissioner Trumbull.
So perhaps this will provide staff with some stall time. I think there's general agreement amongst us that there's some definitional problems. And what I'd like to see is the staff bring back to us a chart that lists any term that's been up in the air, either because Gilroy raised it or we brought it up as members in this hearing, and that would be the left-hand column. The middle column would be if a local government official asked us what it meant, what would staff's response be? That's essentially currently what we would be getting. And then the third column would be a definition that we could use going forward. It seemed to me that we got enough difficulties in our discussion about our terms not being specific enough that we need to tie them down.
Okay.
So I would urge you to make your motion and attach what I just said to it and charge ahead.
I'll put some thought into it. That may just be non-motion direction to staff in the form of a comment. I like where you're going with that, so appreciate that.
And I would be happy to add a date to it, but I'm a little worried that we've given staff enough to keep them busy till our next meeting.
And we all know there's a lot on the docket, Commissioner, so good stuff. Thank you very much. And I can, if you're wrapped up with your comments.
Done.
Great, thank you. We'll turn it over to Vice Chair Reyes, please.
Thank you. I want to ask, well, we're trying to give them a little bit more time. So maybe what I'll do is I'll ask our Gilroy's folks what they believe the impact will be to the master planning work if only this portion south of the channel in terms of Tatum.
So I think a representative from the engineering.
Just give me 1 second, please. Thank you.
We'd have to look to see if it was splitting lines of assessment. So all the properties south of the channel.
The south of channel proposal picks up all the septic tanks. So that's an advantage.
While Gilroy professional, Ms. McCormick, go ahead and take your time. Josh and Neelima, any thoughts?
Yeah, so maybe just a little bit of background, and then we can provide our initial thoughts. So the provision that we're addressing is Government Code Section 56884, which generally provides that if the commission wholly denies an application, you cannot bring a substantially similar application affecting the same property to the commission for 1 year. But subsection B of that section permits the commission to waive that requirement if it determines that the public interest requires doing so. So what we would propose would be language just making that public interest finding at a high level to allow the city to come up with whatever tools they feel they might like to use in the future in a future application. And because the commission may not wholly deny the application, we also don't want to concede that this section necessarily applies. So we would propose indicating that it would just be to the extent it applies. So I can read the draft language we've come up with, and maybe that'll help. So what we propose would be.
And Josh, I think I understand the kernel and the gist of what you're talking about. So here's what I'm thinking of doing is we're going to launch, I feel like we're going to launch a motion sort of like what we've been talking about, and then I'm going to say, Josh, go. And then you're going to tag on that little piece that you have written on your iPad, and that's just going to be the Josh part of the motion, and it's going to be awesome. Okay, very good. Thank you. Let's see where we're at. I'm kind of feeling, colleagues, like we're ready for a motion. Do we feel like we're ready for a motion? I think there's one question out here with Gilroy professional staff. And Ms. McCormick, if you're ready to go, I'd like to just ask that you keep your response as concise and as brief as possible with respect to answering the question.
Okay.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
There was 2 conversations going on, so it was hard for me to concentrate.
I
so
understand.
If you could repeat the question.
My question was if this segment south of Tatum or the channel is approved, how does that impact the master planning process for you?
So I would turn that over to the applicant's engineering consultant to answer that question. And I just.
Good afternoon, Gloria Ballard. As long as the
Gloria, thank you. And I'm just going to ask you to hit the pause button. You can stay there. Gloria, what I'm going to ask you to do is to respond as concisely as you can. I'm a little nervous that we're reopening the public hearing to members of the public. That makes me nervous. I think it's an important question, so I want you to be as concise and directly responsive as you can be. Thank you.
Yes. Gloria Ballard again, if what was approved to annex the property only on the south side of the channel, if the channel does not split lines of assessment, we can do that application. I think you can concur with Nalima, but if it doesn't split lines of assessment, it doesn't interfere with this application.
Okay,
Would you?
very good. Thank you so very much.
Actually, and that question stands for LAFCO staff as well, and I'd like to include, how would the negative declaration that's submitted currently, how long would that be good for?
Please state that again for me, please.
Sure. So my question is, if it sounds like maybe the will of the commission here is to only approve the portion south of the channel. One, how would that impact the master planning process? And then two, if the applicants come back and we have a waiver for a time period, would the negative declaration and their CEQA, basically their CEQA requirement that they submitted as a negative declaration, how long would that be good for? Does that expire in a year? Would we accept it as sufficient if they came back within a year, 2 years?
Okay, sure. So there's two questions. One is, and I think both of these questions are really city questions, but I'll try my best. The number one is, would just adding the southern portion of the proposal area south of the channel, how would it affect the master planning process? My understanding is that the city is considering a specific plan for the entire area, and I don't really know whether they would do any master planning for just the southern portion. That's a question for the city. And then the second part of the question is, would the CEQA apply? I believe the CEQA would apply, but I'll let Josh answer that.
Yeah, and I would note that I agree with Nalima that is likely a city question, just because they were the lead agency under CEQA, so it'd be a question for them when they were to move forward with a future LAFCO application, if they felt that it was under that CEQA coverage or if additional environmental review was required.
Right. Well, what I'm looking for is a LAFCO's recommendation, whether they would see that as sufficient.
LAFCO would be a responsible agency, and we would rely on whatever CEQA the city provides. My understanding is that
you would see it as acceptable. Okay.
Yeah, the city has already prepared CEQA for this, and that's what we would have to rely on.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice Chair. Let me look up and down the dais here. Colleagues, if we feel we're ready for a motion, I'm happy to move forward with that. I see some microphones turned on, so that's great. We're going to go with Commissioner Kishimoto and then Commissioner Kamei.
Okay, well, in the interest of time, I was going to make a motion then. Okay, so it comes in maybe three parts. I guess one is to deny the proposed City of Gilroy Urban Service Area Amendment 2021 above the channel. And part two is to approve the proposed USA Amendment 2021 below the channel. And part three is whatever we're talking about in terms of follow-up. Yes.
Great. Thank you for making the motion, and let me jump in with some clarifications that I hope my colleagues find helpful. Dania, can you bring up that map that we had? And I just want to take a quick moment to make sure everybody's talking about the same thing when we talk about the channel.
And I'll second that motion.
Thank you for the second, Vice Chair. Appreciate it. So I'm looking at the Gilroy USA Amendment map, the yellow one. The channel, I see, thank you, Dunia, as parcel 790091010. So everything south of that is alternative 2. Commissioner Kishimoto, I would also recommend that the channel itself, because we have to decide that channel parcel itself, be part of alternative 2. So the channel itself and everything south of it is part of alternative 2. What was your intent, I wonder?
Is it actually an active water channel? It is?
Yeah.
Then would it make sense to do it in the middle?
No, it's not, it's one piece of property.
Yeah.
One piece of property?
One or the other. And it's really your call, Commissioner Kishimoto. I would have a bias towards the channel itself being as part of alternative 2 approve.
I suppose I would lean towards including it in number 1 just because it's, we're expecting it to remain kind of open space.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. So the channel itself and everything north of the channel is alternative 1, deny the USA expansion. Everything south of the channel itself is alternative 2, approve the USA expansion. And then part 3 of the motion is the Josh 56884. Do you have something you want to read into the record?
I do. And then the third part of the motion would be, to the extent it applies, the commission waives the time limit on a new application affecting the area pursuant to Government Code Section 56884, as the public interest supports permitting the city and applicant to consider ways of addressing the commission's findings that supported the denial of the application for the area including and north of the channel.
Wonderful.
And would request that the commission also consider.
Repeat that, please.
Yep.
I mean, maybe you don't have to read all the numbers, but.
It's certainly, I'll just read it again and I'll go a little bit slower, I apologize. So to the extent it applies, the commission waives the time limit on a new application affecting the area pursuant to Government Code Section.
Basically just waiving
Yep.
the time.
Yep. And then would request the commission also considering adding a 4th component, which would be making the CEQA findings that supported the approval of the urban services area for the area portion south of the channel.
Good point. That was always part of the staff recommendation, alternative 2B, if you will, which is make the CEQA findings. Thank you for the reminder on that, Josh. And so I see Commissioner Kishimoto, second from Vice Chair Arenas. Commissioner Kamei, what's on your mind?
Yeah, so just clarification, I understand that the reason for including those south of the channel are a lot because of, not just the location, but the septic areas, right? And I was just wondering, how do we address the vacant lands inventory in terms of, or is that not part of anything?
Yeah. I'd be happy to start off because I have an opinion on the question that you've been asking. And in the context of the whole application, I've been thinking about the vacant lands inventory, and I keep saying to myself, it is completely consumed. It's eaten up by the RENA and the housing element. I found myself not even looking at the vacant lands inventory after a while because, as I heard the vice chair say, the housing element is such a real deal and all the cities are being taken to task by Sacramento. When I think of what Gilroy has pledged to Sacramento that they can do, it's all part of the housing element. I really stopped thinking about the vacant lands inventory question quite some time ago. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you.
Let me just do a little bit of light advocacy in favor of the motion. I hope that this motion can get across the finish line with 4 or 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 yes votes. I think that would be awesome. I for one, really, as I said, I love and appreciate professional staff from all agencies. Thank you so much, City of Gilroy, for putting your best foot forward on all the effort that was required to fulfill the requirements of the application. Then LAFCO asked you to go back for a second bite at the apple, and you're here again today. I acknowledge that. I appreciate it. I also want to say thank you to LAFCO professional staff for a great job on the application. Just really solid stuff. Mayor Marie Blankley down in Gilroy, when we met at Starbucks on Friday, her challenge, as I perceived it, was, Russ, you have to compare the merits of the application versus relevant law and relevant policy. And I can speak for myself when I say, I feel like I've done that there's no rubber stamp or automatic yes or automatic no. I feel like the solution that we're coming to, where we look at the different parcels separately and treat them as sort of measurable things within the context of the law and policy, is a solution that we're getting to. Critical factors for me, as I've said along the way, this bottom piece below Tatum Avenue, which now has become the piece below the channel, whatever the definition is that somebody would have of sprawl. And by the way, to my knowledge, the word sprawl is not defined itself in the Cortese-Knox-Herzberg Act. So we're all just using our best judgment on what sprawl is. I see a piece of unincorporated land surrounded by 3 sides by the city of Gilroy. It's actually more than 3 sides because it's shaped like a backward C, so I don't know what that is. Maybe it's surrounded on 6 sides. So that was sort of one primary factor, is that the southernmost piece is not sprawl. I mentioned before my views on the city of Gilroy draft housing element. That weighed heavily in my mind and was a primary factor in the north part of what we're talking about here. And I'm really, really glad that Commissioner Bell brought up septic, because that's another piece that's on my mind here. And we have at least 3, if not more, parcels in this bottom piece, which I think is going to make it across the finish line, that are on septic and are on well water. And to any extent that we can move everybody onto municipal water and municipal sewer is a good thing, and is also in line with the efficient delivery of services, which is another one of our mandates here at LAFCO. So thank you, colleagues, for listening. I hope everybody votes yes on the motion that's on the floor, and let's see if we have any other light advocacy. We're going to turn it over to Commissioner Lee.
Yes, first I would like to commend our chair, Russ Melton, for his good work of trying to build this consensus, which frankly, when we walked in, we might have 7 different ideas. To put that together is definitely no small task, so good job. And definitely, Josh, for your first day here, we definitely full use of your expertise legally, so thank you so much. That being said, I think it's definitely a good compromise result of accomplishing so much that we talked about, not going into all the details that Commissioner Bell talked about, the septics, and but at the same time, I think having some creative ideas regarding really, truly, what we're talking about. We are trying to protect green foothills, protecting the foothills not being built, having these type of potential ideas coming back to us from the city, I think is something that is quite creative, but at the same time, I think might be really is a win-win for both sides. They've got areas that's been incorporated they can build. Why do it that way, right? And turn it into some type of conservation easement or whatnot legally, so that those lands really not going to build housing, so that we could come up with other areas that we could build housing where it makes sense. So I just want to say thank you for indulging us all these creative ideas, and I do hope that this application does come back. I hope they don't just take this South Channel and say, okay, we're done, bye. I actually do really want them to come back so that we could actually see other possibility of making sure that other green hillsides could be protected as well in the long run. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Vice Chair Reyes.
I promise it will be short, and it really is just to echo what Supervisor Lee has just said, and I think you've done just a very wonderful job in listening to all of us and bringing us all together. I think it's so important when we, as a body, agree as much as we can, or get to a point where we can agree. And so I think that we've gone as far as we could, and that's because of your leadership, Chair Melton. So thank you so much for what you've done. And I want to just also thank our LAFCO staff. I know that it's not easy to hear maybe some of the feedback, because I am a new person, a new commissioner. I have a lot of questions about process, and I have a lot of questions about terminology. And I want to make sure that I serve as a LAFCO commissioner the best that I can. And so knowing and understanding what the policies are is my way of doing that, and hoping to accomplish that. And so I look forward to working together. I want to make sure that we all are as effective as we can as a body, because we're all doing this work collectively. So thank you so much for the work that you've done. And I also look forward to seeing what comes back. And thank you, Gilroy staff.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vice Chair. I see no further microphone lights turned on, which indicates to me that we're ready for a roll call vote. Emmanuel, please conduct a roll call vote. Yes.
Commissioner Arena,
Yes.
Commissioner Bell. Aye. Commissioner Kamei. Aye. Commissioner Kishimoto. Yes. Commissioner Lee.
Aye.
Commissioner Turnbull.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. Very good. Colleagues, please don't go. We need to talk about the next.
We've left.
I know. But we do need to talk I get it. We need to talk about the next agenda item. Here's what I'd like to do. There's going to be a little bit of a transition here as people come and go. Why don't we just pause for like 5 minutes? I'm not going to call a recess, but we're just going to pause activities without recessing for 5 minutes, and let's just reconvene at 4:35.
that's it. If there's anything wrong here, let me know.
Okay. Okay, it is the time. Let's go ahead and start to reconvene the activities of Santa Clara LAFCO. We're going to move on to agenda item 6. Recording Secretary, Emmanuel. We're ready to move on. So we're going to move on to agenda item 6. This is an important agenda item, Countywide Fire Service Review, Public Review Draft Report. Our recommended action is to receive a presentation on the County-wide Fire Service Review Public Review Draft Report, accept public comments, and then direct staff to revise the report as necessary to address comments received through August 2nd, 2023. So here was the original plan. The original plan is that our consultant, Dan Peterson of AP Triton, who has worked very hard on this report with his consulting firm, was going to give us a presentation. This presentation was included in the commissioner's packet. Hopefully folks have had a chance to go through it, and the target time for the presentation was 60 to 70 minutes, so an hour to an hour 10. The reason that was the preliminary ideas because there is a lot of important stuff in the report, some really interesting recommendations that AP Triton has come up with. And what Nilima and I were just discussing is along the lines of, since the report that Mr. Peterson is about to deliver was part of our agenda packets, that maybe we could go from 60 minutes to more like 5 minutes. But that would require comfort from the commissioners, right, that you're going to forego a 1-hour report because it's already in your agenda packet. So I'm just sort of visually scanning to see if heads are nodding up and down, sort of the notion of a shorter delivery of the presentation. I think I'm seeing that that's a yes. And then that will help keep the entire project on track, because what we need to do today is accept the report, hold a public hearing, see if any of our members of the public have any comments or questions, and then move it forward to the next LAFCO meeting, and that's where an action will take place. So just once again, if everybody's comfortable with hearing sort of a short version of the report, relying on the materials that were part of the agenda packet, then that's how we can go ahead and proceed. Let me just check my notes here to make sure I'm not missing anything. Nilima or Dan, was there anything that I missed saliently out of all of that? So Mr. Peterson, we'll hand it over to you. If you could introduce yourself and take it away, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Dan Peterson. I'm with AP Triton. Been working on this project the last year. And really simply, like Chair Melton indicated, we have a fairly lengthy presentation and there's a lot of good information, but I really think it's important to preserve time for any public comment or even make ourselves available for you to ask questions today. However, we are receiving comments up through the end of today, and it will take us some time to process those comments anyway. You'll have more time to look at this document again before you need to accept the report. So with that, I would recommend I step away and let public comment.
Okay, don't go quite yet. Thank you for the presentation. Let's just see quickly if any of the commissioners have any questions of Mr. Peterson or AP Triton about the fire service review. I do not see any microphone lights turned on yet. By the way, I cannot let this moment pass without acknowledging the work of our subcommittee on this matter, the Technical Advisory Committee, and that's been headed by LAFCO Commissioner Yoriko Kishimoto from day one. I have to acknowledge your leadership and hard work on the TAC and getting us to where we are right now. Along the way, you spent a lot of time with former LAFCO Commissioner Susan Vickland Wilson. We all think very highly of Susan. And then right at the end, when Susan took off, Commissioner Jim Bell jumped in on the TAC. And so, Jim, we really appreciate your efforts there. I see one microphone light turned on is from Commissioner Kishimoto. What's on your mind?
Oh, yes. Well, I just want to say, yes, well, I mean, it's been a pleasure serving as chair of the TAC and working with our staff and our amazing consultants. So I am sorry that my fellow LAFCO commissioners, because of the timing, that you're not going to get the benefit of the presentation, because you would have really enjoyed it, actually. It's as you remember when we started, there was a huge amount of attention on this, right? That both, from the county and everywhere. We had just, maybe that was the CZU fire or many, so we definitely felt on the hot seat in terms of delivering some real insights into the state of our fire and EMS services. Actually, I have to say EMS, because EMS is 70% of our calls. And I think the analysis that our consultants have delivered is pretty revolutionary. I mean, they're a real breakthrough and well worth your time. So I don't know if any of the past presentations have been taped.
They are. We have recordings of the past presentations that we can make available to the commission on the website.
That would be great. And I know the slides are great, but if you can take the time to sit through it, so that preferably you don't see it for the first time, when we're being asked to approve it, so that you have plenty of time to review it. So that so we spent a lot of time on the WUI, the wildland urban interface. There's just, and they came back with many substantial recommendations. So well worth everyone's time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Kishimoto. I agree completely, and again, express my gratitude for your leadership of the TAC. Great stuff. And something you just said resonated with me, because in my city, Sunnyvale, they were looking at some of the recommendations, and it was, this stuff is pretty revolutionary. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it or not, but that's sort of great thinking from AP Triton. Also, colleagues, if you find that you really want to see the presentation, it's been delivered 3 times. So it was delivered as part of the TAC meeting, then there was a North County outreach meeting and a South County outreach meeting, and I believe all of those were recorded. So that's also all on the public record here. I'm looking for any other microphone lights turned on, seeing none. Thank you very much for the report. I appreciate it. It's time to open the public hearing. Speakers in chambers will be called first, followed by speakers participating virtually. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. I'm looking for speaker cards here. I see none. Emmanuel, do we have any?
There's none, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you for raising your hands. And we're looking for a speaker card here. And thank you. Our speaker here in person is, I'm reading this as Jay Logan of the Los Altos Hills County Fire District, if that individual is here. Thank you. Thank you. And if you've been here before, welcome to Santa Clara LAFCO. You can just sort of speak out into the open and the microphones will pick you up.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I hope, does my voice project okay? You can hear me?
You're
Thank
doing
you.
fine.
Well, good afternoon, LAFCO Board of Commissioners, staff, consultants, and public. My name is Jay Logan, and I'm the General Manager of the Los Altos Hills County Fire District. We are one of the fire special districts in the countywide service review. Throughout the fire service review data gathering process, the technical advisory committees, and the community meetings, the LAFCO consultant called for input to ensure the accuracy of the fire service review, and we appreciate this very much. The Los Altos Hills County Fire District submitted its response that was dated August 1st, 2023, that provides the requested inputs for accuracy that pertain to the district, along with the details that substantiate the requested corrections. As you read the district's response to the fire services review, 2 general themes emerge. The first is consistency and clarity. The district's profile and the reference to Los Altos Hills County Fire District through the various sections frequently do not align. The reader can reach a variety of conclusions due to these inconsistencies, and the corrections that we put forth requested in the response will help with that alignment and with the clarity. So we're hoping that the commission asks for the acceptance of our response to clarify the record. And the second is a holistic approach, and I think this is most important because fire safety and wildfire risk reduction based on fire science have quickly evolved due to the lessons learned from the catastrophic firestorms, climate change, and population growth in our WUI terrains. The focus on the metrics of fire suppression and conventional effectiveness of firefighting operations provides data for response to fire once it ignites. However, frequently omitted is the methodology of how agencies are reducing the risk of ignition and fire intensity, and how communities can be informed, prepared, and put action into motion to mitigate these wildfire risks and to build community resiliency. So our second request is that Los Altos Hills County Fire District encourages the consultant to develop further content in the fire service review on the programs, public education, and opportunities for partnership by agencies prior to the release of the final report. There's a window of opportunity here to add this content to the fire service review. More can be done to portray how such models add great value and are transformative in the fire safety is managed, developed, supported, and can regionalize fire safety outcomes. Los Altos Hills County Fire District is available to assist in this endeavor, and I thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much for coming to Santa Clara LAFCO to share your thoughts. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Commissioner.
much.
Thank
Thank you. Okay, let's keep going then. I'm just going to do a quick visual scan to see if any of our members of the public here in person desire to make comment. I don't have any speaker cards. I don't see any individuals. So now it's time to turn it over to Zoom. And recording secretary, none on Zoom. Okay, very good. So that means I'm going to close the public hearing and open a commission discussion. Mr. Peterson, can we just talk for a second, please? If you can come back up to the... I remember very early on in our meeting today during public comment, somebody called in. They probably should have called in now, but I don't know if you remember that. It was from one of the agencies, and the comment was, can I get an acknowledgement of the email that I sent in yesterday? I'll stop there. Are we typically replying to emails as they come in just to acknowledge receipt?
I can answer that. We are not acknowledging those because we've said that we will take all comment and compile them and prepare a response to those comments, and those will be released later this month. So we have clearly established that process, and that's why we haven't provided those comments to the commission today, because we are in the process of collecting them. But we have received comment from Fire Safe Council, yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for acknowledging that. And this is going to be all the magic sauce that gets us across the finish line, is sort of a meticulous process where you take in all the comment, document that you've received it, so that as we exit the process, nobody will be able to say, I made a comment and it got lost in an ocean of other comments. So I know that you're going to be meticulous in gathering and documenting and making sure that all of the LAFCO commissioners can see all of the comments that came in and how they're addressed. I hope that makes sense how I'm saying that.
Well, the comments are coming directly to LAFCO. Emmanuel is sending a compiled version each week to me. And each commenter, I'm identifying and breaking down their components into sections so that we can provide a response to even individual sections of whatever they put. Some comments are simple statements of support of a certain behavior or a certain department. Others might have as many as 15 to 25 suggestions. Each one of those is getting its own category and an own space for me to respond. you'll see that in one document.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Okay, Commissioner Kishimoto, over to you.
Well, let's see, well, I guess in the interest of time, I'm just going to go ahead and make the motion to direct staff to revise the report as necessary to address these comments received through August 2nd, 2023.
Great, thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Looking for, thank you, with the second from Commissioner Lee. Any further comments? Commissioner Kishimoto.
Yes, well, I mean, I did want to, thank Ms. Long, who came from the Los Altos Hills and sat through the very long first item. I would second her comments that, and the consultants have come a long ways, I mean, compared to the past. I mean, completely different from the past in terms of acknowledging the WUI, and as is true for probably many services, I mean, 90% of the efforts is in prevention, right? It's in education, inspections, vegetation management, et cetera. So it's not in the firefighters running out. So, but if there's anything more that we can do, that would be definitely encouraged. So that's, yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. All right, I do not see any other advocacy on the motion. The motion is per staff recommendation. Emmanuel, roll call vote, please.
Chairperson Melton.
Yes.
Commissioner Arenas.
Yes.
Commissioner Bell. Aye. Commissioner Kamei.
Yes.
Commissioner Kishimoto.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Aye.
Commissioner Trumbull.
Yes.
Unanimous, Mr. Chair.
Wonderful. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Peterson, thank you for coming to Santa Clara LAFCO today. Really appreciate all your hard work with AP Triton. Okay, colleagues, let's shift it into high gear here. We have just one more action item, and then we'll be pretty close to wrapping it up. We're going to move on to agenda item number 7, CLAFCO related activities. Item 7.1, designate voting delegate and alternate for 2023 CLAFCO Board of Directors election. We have to appoint a voting delegate, an alternate voting delegate. I'll just say I'm going to be attending. I'm happy to be the voting delegate. Do we have any other LAFCO commissioners who are going to Cal LAFCO? Commissioner Kamei, you raised your hand. Do you want to be alternate voting delegate? Is that okay? Or yeah. Oh, Commissioner Kishimoto?
Yes, I was going to go as well, but I'm happy to be.
No, because I have to, there's one meeting that I can't miss, so I will actually have to come back to San Jose and then go back. So why don't you go ahead and.
As alternate? Oh, no,
Yeah,
you're
no,
going to
you
be
be
the.
an alternate,
Okay.
or
Okay.
whatever.
I think we have
would-
Melton as
I'm
primary
just
and
going to get
Kishi.
educated.
Excellent. Let's turn that into a motion. Melton as primary, Yoriko, if you're okay with that. Kishimoto as alternate. That's a motion. Looking for a second. Yoriko?
Second. I'll
Okay.
second
Rosemary, thank you so very much for that. We have a motion and a second. Manuel, can you give us a roll call vote, please?
Chairperson Melton.
Yes.
Commissioner Arenas.
Yes.
Commissioner Bell. Aye. Commissioner Kamei.
Aye.
Commissioner Kishimoto.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Aye.
Commissioner Melton.
Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We're going to move on to agenda item 9, commissioner reports. We're going to ask if any commissioners have anything to report. Commissioner Kamei, what's on your mind?
Oh, no, sorry.
Oh, okay,
That
very
was
good.
previous item.
I understand. Seeing no lights turned on, we're going to move on to agenda item number 10, newspaper articles, newsletters. Ask staff if any newspaper articles. Okay, very good. Seeing none, let's move on to agenda item 11, written correspondence. Ask staff if there is any written correspondence to report. Okay. There's no items to report. We're going to move on to item 12, adjournment, and this regular meeting of Santa Clara LAFCO is adjourned. Our next meeting is October 4th, 2023 at 1:15 p.m. right here in the Board of Chambers. Current time is 4:55 p.m. and we are adjourned. Thank you so very much, everybody. Thank you.